Welcome to the Shunned podcast. It's a new year, 2020, a whole new decade, and I'm going to keep exposing religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Being at the beginning of a new year and a new decade, I kind of see big things in the future. More and more people are speaking out against these different cults or religious organizations, and I think there's really a lot of momentum building in the ex-Jehovah's Witness movement. I wanted to get this year and this new decade off to a great start. So one of the things that I've done is I've released a new website called xjwhelp.com. So again, that's xjwhelp.com. I've made videos to help answer some of the common questions that I get asked, some of the issues that I see come up that people are struggling with, and I'm going to continue to add to this library of videos there. There's a free downloadable roadmap to help you see where you are in your journey. There's resources where you can find local meetups, online meetups through the Shunned Recovery Project, other projects and books that might be of help, and even a live chat service or individual coaching if that's what you're looking for. I will continue to add to the site regularly. So to celebrate the release of xjwhelp.com, to celebrate the new year, the new decade, I'm releasing 10 episodes this month instead of 2. So, I just really wanted to do something to kind of blow it out. My initial goal was to do an episode a day for the whole month of January. That was a ridiculous goal that I could not meet, and that's okay too. But I've got 10 episodes ready to go, and I'm going to start releasing one a day, Monday through Friday for the next 2 weeks. So, I really wanted to kind of do something to show you. There's so many people who are reaching out to me. It's really hard to keep up. There are so many of us out here that want to tell our stories, and that's an amazing thing. So in order to streamline this process of releasing so many, I'm not going to tell you who you're about to meet. You can read the description if you're interested in that. That way I can add this to the front of each episode without having to spend time recording each individually. So let's dive right into the interview and get to meet today's guest.
My name is Xitlalitl. I'm 20 years old, and I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
All right, Xitlalitl. So how'd you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. So my mom was contacted in the door-to-door ministry when I was about 3, and she got baptized when I was around 5 years old.
Yeah.
So pretty much since I was 3, that's kind of all I've known.
Yeah. Do you even have pictures or anything of birthdays or anything for them? Do you?
Yes, I have like a handful of pictures here and there, and it was funny because as a witness, I really enjoyed showing these pictures to people because they were one of the few pictures I had of me as a kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have some pictures of me during Christmas and some pictures of me at my birthday party. I had I don't know if you're familiar with what's it called, that Sesame Street. I have a picture of me with the Big Bird from Sesame Street pinata, and it was life size pretty much. Yeah. But it was funny, whenever I showed pictures to people, they always felt like it was weird that I kept these pictures of me because it was pagan stuff. But to me, it was well, they're memories, and obviously I was a kid, and I value my memories whether or not they're good or not.
Yeah, and that is an interesting point. I think it's been made before too, is how witnesses view those pictures. My parents had pictures of me, celebrating holidays and stuff, and there was a point at which I was like, well, that's kind of strange, if that's supposed to be bad or whatever, why would you keep it? But now I'm really glad that they kept those pictures because now I have those memories. And
and I feel like I knew a lot of people, and especially my mom, who would get mad at someone, or they would, have a bad experience, and all of a sudden they would go through a bunch of pictures and just delete them or get rid of them. And to me, I was like, well, I don't want to do that because my memories are so scarce already that I want to preserve them as much as possible.
Yeah, it's almost like shunning memories,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, you said that your mom came into the religion when you were around 3, 4. So how did she get introduced to it?
So my mom was a Spanish speaking person, and we lived in Texas at the time. So we had a woman who was in the Spanish territory, I guess, and she basically showed her God's name from the Bible. And my mom was one of those people that was like, "Oh, I've never heard of God's name before." And it pretty much to her was like this amazing thing that she found. And she had grown up as a Catholic before that, and she pretty much distanced herself as much as she could from that because she thought it was like weird, or she never really felt a connection to God through that religion. And then when she found out that, oh, God has a name, then to her it was like, oh, now I can actually be close to God. And so for her it was pretty amazing
Yeah.
to find that out.
It
But
shows, what a
yeah,
good point that is, just to when once they show you Jehovah in the Bible, it's like they've opened your eyes to something you didn't know right off the bat. And so it's like, well, what else do they know that I don't know?
yeah,
It's a great sales
exactly.
pitch.
Yeah. Although even though she was immediately interested, she always like told the story about how much of a difficult Bible study she was, because she would always like hide from her Bible study teacher, and like when she would come knocking, she'd go like turn off all the lights, and we'd all try and be quiet. Or she'd make an appointment with her and be like, "Oh, I'll be home," and then she'd go off and do something just so that she wouldn't be there. But what was kind of funny was one of the things that made her think that this was the true religion, I guess, was that when she would go and try and get away from the Bible study teacher, that she'd always end up finding her somehow, anyways. One time she found her at the grocery store when she was supposed to be home, and to her it was like, oh, well, Jehovah was searching for me. So it was just a lot of
Wow.
things that she felt like were, I guess, to her it was like, okay, I can't get away from this, so it must be the truth. Yeah. And to go along with that,
That's interesting.
yeah, and to go along with that, we actually moved to Mexico for a year because she was from Mexico. And so we moved to Mexico for a year to live with her parents. And while we were down there, we had a witness knock on our door, and to her it was like, well, I moved to a different country and they still find me. And
Mm.
so she started going to meetings down there, and I guess she had one sister there. And I mean, this is like a Latin community, so they're very, fiery and pretty much just say whatever is on their mind. And she had one sister that went up to her and she's like, "Why aren't you studying?" She's like, "You need to get your act together." She's like, and she went, she's like, "If you're not going to study, then you're going to die at Armageddon. So you better decide if you're going to be on Jehovah's side or if you're going to be on Satan's side." And my mom was like, she didn't know how to feel about that. But as soon as we came back to America, she was like, "Okay, well, I guess I have to study then." And pretty much that's when she got baptized.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to be on Jehovah's side or do you want to be on Satan's and die?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wow. You really just see how the messaging plays on people, and then how the kind of, there's almost like a confirmation bias there where you try to hide and then they find you and you're like, well, it must be a sign,
Yeah.
just because something, of happenstance that a person might have seen you in a grocery store or whatever. But when you are inclined to attribute things to things like that, it can really play on your emotions and get you involved in things. And it's just interesting that she was literally actively trying to hide. I was wondering how she came
Yeah.
in if she was trying to hide from them.
Yeah,
Uh,
I always found that interesting how she could justify it all,
yeah,
because clearly there was something that felt wrong to her, but she still went along with it.
yeah,
And I mean, now as an adult, I can kind of see what played out in her life that made her kind of be drawn to a religion like this.
hmm,
And I mean, a big part of it comes from the way she was raised too. She always kind of felt like she was kind of the black sheep of the family. And when she was born, unfortunately, her older brother had just passed away, and he was about 7 at the time. So when she was born, my grandmother went through really bad postpartum, and they were just never able to bond after that. And so I think part of the reason why she was so drawn to this was also because she felt like she didn't really have much else.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there's some sort of trauma in the past,
Yeah.
and people are looking. Maybe it's for community, or maybe it's just looking to escape the trauma and not to face it or deal with it. Looking for help sometimes through escape, and they find the witnesses or whatever, and get introduced to that and escape into that. So
Yeah.
it's a shame because I think if they were to get actual help, then they might be able to live better and happier lives. Um, but the religion does give them something, which is why they're attracted to it.
Oh yeah.
So, what about you? How did the religion impact you as a little kid when you came in, or your mom came into it? How'd you start to see the world being raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, at first, when my mom was first studying, I thought it was the coolest thing to learn all this new information and be like, oh, God does have a name. And to me, at the time, I was like, oh, this is neat. And one story that my mom also likes to tell is that when I was about 4 and we had moved to Mexico at the time, I kept talking to her about Jehovah, and she would do something that the witnesses didn't agree with, and I'd say, oh, Jehovah doesn't like that. And I would just keep like pestering her about it. And but I mean, once I started growing up, I kind of, when I looked at other people, I had like conflicting views, I guess. And so there was a part of me that knew that I could never really be close to anyone that wasn't a witness. And I never really fully understood why that was. And so as a kid, I kind of would develop friendships with people at school. And, I'd see like, oh, these people are cool and they're nice to me. And as a kid, I also had a lot of problems with people in our congregations, with people treating me badly, and just kind of generally not being very kind to me in the congregation. And so as a kid, I kind of had a hard time understanding why people outside that were nice to me were bad, but people that were inside the congregation that were mean to me were good. Hmm. And I mean, as I got older, that kind of turned into me living a quote unquote double life. But it was always kind of this conflict in me where I was like, I never really knew how to feel about people, whether or not I should, keep my distance from them, or if I should, actually involve myself with people outside of the congregation.
Yeah. So you said that inside the congregation, people were mean to you. What can you give some examples? What were they doing? Like, why be mean to little Xitlalitl? What were they doing?
Well, so growing up, my mom was a single parent, and so that meant that a lot of times we would live in people's spare bedrooms, or people's here we call them ohanas, but they're like little houses that are on your property, but they're not part of your house. Okay. And so we were always in very close proximity to other people. And what ended up happening is sometimes they would have like kids, and their kids would treat me very badly. So one time we lived with a family who had a 14-year-old daughter at the time, and I was about 5, and she would, hit me, and she would push me down the stairs and just belittle me whenever she could. Wow. And yeah. And when I was about 5 or 6, we had a shepherding call, and I kind of, started breaking down, and I told him, I was like, I don't want to go back and live there because she's mean to me. And, nobody had any idea what was going on because my mom worked so much. And so yeah, that was just kind of one of the few examples of things that happened. But that was kind of a reoccurring issue where people would either be physically abusive to me or they would, just be verbally abusive, just belittle me. And um, yeah.
Was that I'm just wondering, do you have any idea why? I mean, was it because you were like, maybe they felt like you were encroaching upon their space, or
Um,
was it maybe like an economic thing where they looked at you a certain way, or
I have no idea what it was.
hmm,
As soon as we moved out of there, she ended up not really being a part of my life after that because she was not somebody that went to meetings regularly. And after we moved out, I just never had to see her again.
yeah, okay.
And so, and I never heard anything about what happened to her or anything, um, probably because I was 5.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe somebody mentioned something and I just didn't bother to listen, but yeah.
Yeah, you had just mentioned that it was a recurring pattern, so I was just curious as to if there was like some sort of a prejudice or a power dynamic, or what it was
Um,
that was making people act out toward you in particular.
I think part of it was just that my mom, because she was a single parent, had to ask a lot of people. And I mean, we were always in not a good situation financially. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like she could afford to pay people all the time to watch me. And I think, people are already very stressed in that environment, and they kind of just took it out on me
Yes.
because I was another thing that was stressing them out.
Yeah, and you look back at witness life, and witness life itself is very stressful.
Yeah.
And now here's this little girl that's in our life that she has needs, and that's just one more mouth to feed or person to look after or to deal with or whatever. And it's tough, I think, for a lot of people to make it as witnesses anyway, even in their own families, to deal with their own kids and not take it out on them. So I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's one of those things roll downhill. Unfortunately, bad things tend to happen to one, and then it just gets passed on and on and on. So for yourself, you mentioned that your mom worked a lot. What was your life like then at home, at least when she was around? Were you all, when she was around, were you the types that's, did you study a lot? How were you as witnesses at home?
Um, we were not what you would call good witnesses. Shortly after my mom got baptized, she started dating unbeliever, quote unquote, and she ended up getting pregnant, and she wasn't married. And as a kid, I didn't really understand what was happening, but we ended up moving from that state to the state where he lived, and pretty much that meant that she kind of got away with what she did. That was how I felt
Really?
as a teenager, that nothing ever really happened.
Hmm.
That she, like, when I started putting the pieces together as a young teenager, I was like, wait a second, something doesn't really add up here. And I was like, my sister's this old, and you guys didn't get married until this time of year. And so to me, I was like, she was never disfellowshipped. I don't know if she was ever reproved or anything, but to me as a teenager, I kind of remember thinking back on that, and that was one of the first things that made me kind of upset about the religion, which I was like, I didn't understand why, if she did something so bad according to them, why nothing ever happened to her.
Hmm.
And um but yeah, I mean, that was just one of the few things that kind of happened as a kid where it made me uncomfortable. But so when we moved from Texas to California, and we moved to a really different type of place than I was used to. So number one, I only spoke Spanish at this point in time, and we moved to an area where nobody spoke Spanish, and I kind of had to just learn English like within a couple months.
Wow.
And uh, so within the congregation, that was also really hard because pretty much had no clue what was going on. And I mean, the nice part of that was I got to sleep through the meeting because I couldn't follow. So I very much enjoyed that. But yeah, so that was kind of a difficult point in my life. That was around 7, where everything just kind of seemed to change out of nowhere, and I didn't really have a good understanding as to why. But at this point in time, my mom kind of, not that she really changed, but I think the stress of the life that we had now kind of triggered something in her, and she became a lot more volatile of a person than she used to be. Not that she wasn't before, but it definitely increased a lot at that point. And I found out later as an adult that she had something called borderline personality disorder.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And yeah, and that pretty much made life suck as a kid.
Yeah, that's a tough diagnosis.
Yeah, it is. And one thing that's very common with these people is that they refuse to admit that they have a problem. And so growing up, my mom, her disorder would kind of show up here and there. And she would always, deny that there was ever any problem that she had. One thing that happened a lot was I would get pulled out of school early because my mom was having a problem with someone, and she felt like, she would get these moments of extreme paranoia where she just felt like everyone was out to get her, and, she would get super emotional, and I would get pulled out of school early and miss the next couple of days because we needed to run away somewhere, and, we needed to get somewhere where people couldn't find us. And as a kid, that ended up really affecting me in school because I missed a lot of school, and I ended up having to be I needed one-on-one time at school a lot because I couldn't follow the material anymore. And yeah, that happened, I would say, once a month, where she would, just pull me out of nowhere, and I would miss a week of school. And she, not only did that happen, but she would always also kind of use me as her little therapist, I guess you could say, where she would just dump all her emotions onto me. And she made it a habit of telling me, that I was responsible for her happiness at that point, that I was, she'd give me something that I was in charge of, like, oh, you have to protect me from this, or you can't let me do something like this because, that'll make me upset, and it's your job to keep me happy. And as a kid, it felt good to have a responsibility like that, because in my head I was like, wow, she thinks of me as an adult. And considering this started happening around 7, that was very bad that, an adult would consider me their peer.
Yeah, that's a very unfair place to put a kid.
Yeah.
And just for anyone who, and this, some of this may ring true for you as well, but for anyone who really doesn't know exactly what borderline personality disorder is, I believe now they're referring to it more as emotional dysregulation disorder. But
okay.
I believe, I'm not sure. I think that I could be wrong, but there are books written about it. I remember reading one that was called Walking on Eggshells.
Yeah. And I have the sequel to that.
Okay. Is that, well, there's also one called, I think.
It's the one that's specifically for children of people like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's called Surviving a Borderline Parent.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that book. There's also a term that is often used with people who suffer from that disorder that is, I hate you, don't leave me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And it's just it's a very, and I say none of this to demonize the people who have it. It's very difficult for them to regulate emotions, and usually that's because, and when you look at like your mom, her mom had postpartum depression and didn't bond with her.
Yeah.
It's an attachment. There's a lot of attachment issues there, and then those attachment issues end up being issues that get passed down to you, and
Yeah.
because it's just that's a really tough place to be for a kid when their parent is suffering from that, of no fault of their own.
Oh yeah.
Not I always want to make sure that I'm not moralizing anything because that's what Jehovah's Witnesses do. Nobody chooses this. It's just a very unfortunate reaction at times to a lack of attachment, and yeah, that's intense because your mom is basically putting all that attachment onto you as a little kid,
Yeah.
and you can't possibly be that for her.
No. And so because this happened so regularly, by the time that I was actually 9 years old, I completely shut down emotionally. I
Yeah,
had a really hard time expressing myself or showing any sort of emotion at all. I, and now I realize what was happening is I was, dealing with depression of my own.
sure.
But yeah, it was when I started looking back on it and thinking like, when did I start having these problems with my mental health? And I was like, oh, it started at 9. It was kind of a sad realization to think that it happened so young
Yeah,
because of what I had to go through.
yeah. That's just such a heavy burden. I know my mom thought that my dad might have
Mm.
BPD, and she had read some books about it, and I mean, he hit some of the hallmarks of it as well. But
It's a lot more common than people think it is.
yeah,
And it's a lot more generally diagnosed in women than it is in men.
yeah,
And that's not because it happens more in women. It's just one of those things that, you know, interpretation kind of comes into
sure.
play here. Yeah.
Sure, and I think I mean, my dad certainly never had the overstepping as far as um, confiding things in us kids
Mm.
or attaching in that way. But it also, and I'm not a BPD expert at all, so but it may be that maybe it expresses itself differently in men than women.
Oh yeah,
Um,
and there's different
yeah,
types of ways. I believe there's 4 ways that it's commonly expressed. One is more outward, and some people that have BPD can be more they can internalize more than others. So it's kind of
yeah,
that's part of the reason why it's so hard to diagnose too,
yep.
is that it resembles a lot of other things.
Yeah, and like most of these things, I mean, you can take it to ADD or bipolar, so many things. It's the DSM is it's a bunch of questions to help diagnose things, but it's not like you take a blood test and you're like, "Oh yeah, I have borderline personality disorder," or "Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I have
exactly.
ADHD." There's no conclusive proof. These are the best people can do to try to figure out what exactly the hallmarks are and what's causing it. But obviously, your mom had some issues in her childhood that speak directly to it. So,
Yeah, exactly.
um,
And another thing that was really common for her was something that is very common with people with this disorder is extreme black and white thinking.
mhm,
And so what that meant growing up was that a lot of times my mom would go from viewing, like, in relation to me, she'd view me as like the golden child, I can do no wrong and I'm the best thing that's ever happened in the world. And she loves me unconditionally. And then, the next day or even a few hours later, she would, think that I'm terrible and that I'm only out to make her miserable and
mhm.
that, she regrets that I ever, was born. And so it was kind of hard to, I never really knew what to expect from her,
Yeah.
how she was going to treat me.
Thus the walking
And
on eggshells.
yeah, exactly. And that's another thing that separates VPD from like bipolar, where it's like when I was first learning about these disorders, I kind of felt like they were too similar to distinguish. But the big difference is when people with borderline have mood swings, it can shift within a couple of hours,
Yeah.
whereas people with bipolar take a little bit longer to have their mood swings.
Yep.
And but with my mom, it was like, I never knew what was going to make her happy and what was going to make her mad. And so, again, by the time I was 9, I kind of just, when it came to my mom, I just kind of shut down to her. And I didn't really, from 9 and up, I kind of didn't interact with her more than I had to. And that caused a lot of problems because she felt like I was disrespecting her, or I didn't, I wasn't showing, the love that she deserved as a parent. And to me, I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Sorry. And, this is just the way things are now. And
yeah,
so,
the point is just self-protection.
Yeah.
My dad was very much like that, as far as you never knew from one moment to the next how he was going to be. And so it was best just not to interact with him. We kids, as much as we could, we just tried to stay outside or whatever and just not be around him. Then we didn't have to deal with him. Or try to guess what was okay to do today and what was not. And it's just, it's a guessing game, and it's not a fun one at all.
No.
So did you find any solace in school at all? Did you find, you talked about some kids there, or people being nicer to you there. Did you find a little bit of a break at school? Did you make friends? And
I did. One thing that I really appreciated about the schools that I went to is the teachers were so great. They kind of took a special interest in me because they knew that my home life was difficult. And, they would help me out wherever they needed to. And they would do like special things for me. One day I had to miss school picture day. And as a kid, that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my teachers went out of her way to do a special picture for me so that I could still be a part of it and have my picture with all the other students.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so as a kid, it was really touching to me that people went out of their way to make me still feel included in things that I missed out on.
Yeah, and that's caring about you just for you. No exactly. Ulterior motives.
Yeah. And which was something that at home was very common where, if my mom did do something good for me, it always had an ulterior motive to it. It was never just about doing something nice for her children.
Yeah.
But as far as classmates went, I did end up becoming really good friends with some of the students. One student in particular when I was 9, she had just transferred into our school, and I immediately bonded with her because we had a very similar home life. And at the time, we were 9, and I remember she taught me my first couple of swear words, and I was like, oh, this is really neat. And I was like, I'm going to use these all the time. They're really fun. And I mean, as a kid, I knew that I wasn't supposed to say these words, but that was like what made them fun.
Of course.
And and to me, I was like, I don't really care about anything right now, so I'm just going to do whatever I want and say these swear words. And but she ended up becoming a really good friend of mine and somebody that I could just kind of relate to in things that I felt like nobody else could relate to me in. What ended up happening, though, is that kind of led towards me living a JW double life, because there was a young girl in my congregation who went to the same school that I did. And one day, we were all playing together, and I accidentally let a couple swear words slip out, and I knew I shouldn't do that because she was a good JW, and she ended up telling her grandma on me, who was an elder's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the next day she was out in service with my mom, and my mom just lost it. She started, yelling in the car group, and she, started like insulting this woman, and just kind of just basically she had a temper tantrum in the car group. And that afternoon she picked me up early from school, and she was crying, and she was upset at me, and she's telling me like, oh, I've heard this and this about you. And immediately my instinct was just to lie, and I was like, this is what I have to do to protect myself. I know what's going to happen if she finds out that I actually am swearing at school, and it's not going to be fun. And so I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I never once said a word like that in my life. I don't even know what that is. What are you talking about? What is a swear word? And yeah, so basically that kind of created a rift in the congregation at the time, because I was about 10 or 11. And so everyone kind of in my congregation was split into two sides, where one side believed me and one side didn't believe me. And so as a kid, even though I felt much more comfortable at school, that created a really big impact on my conscience, because I was still a Jehovah's Witness, and I still believed in it a little bit. And so growing up, I never told anyone that, and it just kind of kept bothering me and kept making me feel bad. And I always thought that was going to be something that prevented me from getting into paradise. And I was, I would pray all the time, for forgiveness about that. And
let's just point out how much angst has been caused here, because you said a couple swear words, and now grown ass people
exactly
who are in a congregation are split over whether or not a 10-year-old said some swear words, and a 10-year-old is now feeling the weight of the world as though she cannot gain salvation, because that time she said some swear words and then she denied it.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Really? Like, are you? What are you people doing here?
Yeah.
Like that's what you're divided over. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And at the time, there was two sides of me, where one side felt like the congregation is justified in having this confusion, and my guilt is good because I did something bad. Sure. And there was another part of me that thought, this is all dumb, and yes. Why am I feeling so much guilt over something so trivial here? But again, it's that I guess it's called cognitive dissonance, where it's like you can't really you feel confused about what's going on.
You're holding two competing thoughts or feelings.
Yes.
And it's difficult. Exactly. But and it is just ridiculous how much is put, on a kid for something like that. They create that shame, and they want it to play out, and they want you to feel guilty and to go to them. Then they have power over you because you need them, and you need their forgiveness. So it's just a shame that so much pressure is put on children over such petty things. And then it, even carries on into the congregation. So I was wondering, how life was in the congregation for you, because if your mom has BPD, chances are you talked about picking up and moving or whatever, but did she struggle to stay in one place, and did that impact you? Because you couldn't make friends and such?
Yeah, when we lived in Texas, we lived in Houston, so it was a really big city. So when we were there, I would say about every year or so, we would kind of just pick up and move. And as a kid, I just thought it was, my mom likes to keep things new and exciting and she likes change. But once I started getting older and I started hearing stories and kind of, again, putting things together, I realized, oh, what was really happening was my mom would get into a fight with someone and then she would just decide to leave because she didn't want to deal with it. And once we moved to California, though, we moved to a super small town. And basically, there was one congregation every hour or so where we lived. And to her, it was just not worth it to keep moving. But that did mean that there was a lot of conflict in this one little congregation of about 60 people, maybe less than that. And we were in one congregation for a while. We ended up moving an hour away because I don't really remember. I think it was just we had a property closer to that congregation, so we ended up moving over there. And that congregation was even smaller. It was like 20 people max. And I remember one time she got into a huge fight with a elderly sister who was like, I don't know, 80 at the time. And the argument was because my mom had a part on the school that night and she wanted the sister to just pretend like she had a book in front of her. And the sister wanted to bring an actual book onto the stage and my mom didn't want to let her do that. She told her, no, it's more believable if you don't have a book than to bring the book that I'm not talking about on the stage. And, basically that was the gist of it. But it blew up into such a big thing that my mom left the meeting early. We didn't go to meetings for the next week. And that sister had to come and apologize to her because she was an elder's wife. And even after she apologized to her, she didn't talk to her for another year. And that was really awkward because it was a congregation of 20 people. And so pretty much if you didn't talk to someone, it was very obvious that you were doing that.
Wow.
And it was really uncomfortable. But that just happened regularly,
Yeah. And so for you as a young witness, did you escape at all into actually like giving talks or field service or trying to make friends? Like, I mean, in a congregation of 20, I'm sure it's hard to make any friends, but
yeah, plus they were all like 70.
yeah. Wow. So, but how did you, how was your life growing up as a young witness, leading up to your eventual baptism? How did you feel at the meetings and participating in these things? Were you one who was really involved or were you kind of on the outskirts?
I guess probably a little bit of both, where I was definitely on the outskirts because my mom kind of wasn't very regular at the meetings. But when it came to me, both congregations that we were in, I was kind of the only child there other than my little sister. And so because of that, the adults kind of took a special interest in me and really tried to help me mature spiritually, quote unquote. And so there was a part of me that did really try and do my best when it came to spiritual things. So I loved giving talks. It was one of my favorite things to do. I loved putting them together, and even now I love to do a little bit of writing. And as a kid, I kind of thought about it as just kind of writing a piece of fiction because it's not like this was ever going to happen at an actual door. And so, yeah. Yeah.
I have to laugh because I always, when I as a brother gave a talk, I had some section of scripture or whatever, and I would talk about it. But when the sisters got up there, it had to be like This lady at the door just happened to ask about some verses in Nahum. And
Yes.
and like that would ever happen ever.
Yes.
And
I remember once I gave a talk about the lake of fire, and at the time I was like maybe 13, and the sister with me was, twice my age. And I think I did my setting at the time was I was on a Bible study, and that was a setting that I used almost all the
oh, of
time because
course.
it was the only one that made sense. And yeah, I remember as a kid, I was like, even as a kid, I thought this would never happen. Why are we giving talks about stuff that would never happen in real life? But I mean, that made it a lot easier for me to give talks because I knew that this stuff was pretty much just fiction, and I didn't really have to worry about it being hyper realistic or anything.
Hmm.
But with that in mind, I also hated field service. So I pretty much tried to get out of it anytime I could, which wasn't very often. I would pretend to be sick, or I would, if my mom would be mad at someone, I'd just kind of be like, yeah, you don't have to be around that person right now. Let's just wait until meeting and it'll all be better then. And that would kind of get me out of going out in service for a day.
One
But
magical day.
yeah, exactly. And so as a kid, I really got into reading a lot, and I read stuff like, like vampire novels and, like Twilight. I was really big into Twilight as a, preteen.
Bringing demons in the home.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I used to read it on our way to field service or on our way to the meeting. I would like bring my set of Twilight books and I'd read them. And but yeah, as far as field service went, even when we were out in service, I would do my best to not have to actually be at the door or have to say anything. I didn't have return visits very often because I hated talking to people about what we were talking about. And so
is that because you didn't really believe it?
Yeah, I had a hard time being fully convinced.
Yeah.
So there was a part of me that believed it, but the bigger part of me was like, this is all crap. And, none of this actually makes sense. And I think the only return visit I got while we lived in California, I made it because I was talking about one of the nature sections in one of the Awake magazines, and it didn't actually have anything to do with the Bible itself. It was just talking about gorillas or something like that,
Right.
and that got me my first return visit. And I was like, okay, I think I can talk about this. And yeah, but other than that, sorry about that. I hated the ministry pretty much.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, if you were awake at all too, I wasn't, but to be awake at all and to realize that this isn't something you fully believe in and you have to go tell people at the door, that's a really tough place to be for a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, kids have struggles being interested in it in the first place. So how did you go then through your teenage years as you're getting older and maturing a little bit to the point of getting baptized when this wasn't really something that you were super into?
So I actually got baptized right before I turned 12. So I was really young, and I didn't really have a huge desire to get baptized. I remember it was just one of those things that I felt like I needed to do. And when I turned 10, basically my mom sat me down on my 10th birthday and she was like, okay, you're 10 now, so write down your spiritual goals. And so I wrote down whatever I felt was a goal at the time. And she was like, okay, all right, so we're going to work on that. And my two goals were signing up for the Theocratic Ministry School and becoming an unbaptized publisher. And so that same day, my mom was like, okay, we're going to go ahead and do that now. And I was like, what do you mean? I thought I was going to have some time to work towards this.
These are goals. These are
Yeah.
future goals.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, way future. And she's like, yeah, so we made a call like right after that, and I signed up for the theocratic ministry school, and then I had to start working on the questions for becoming an unbaptized publisher.
Wow, you got scammed.
Yeah, exactly. And pretty much as soon as I became an unbaptized publisher, my mom was like, okay, now we're gonna work on getting you baptized. And I was like, what? I was like, when did this happen? And so my mom would make me go over the questions whenever I had free time. And she was supposed to go over them with me, but she never actually did. She was not particularly interested in that. At the time, we were also studying the Bible Teach book together, but we never finished the book. We got about halfway, and basically when we got halfway, my mom was like, she didn't have a strong desire to actually go through anything with me. And I remember one time we were studying the chapter about the ransom, I think, and I was having a hard time understanding it because I was like 10, 11, and I started crying because I was like, I can't understand it. And so she told me to, go to my room. And at this point in time, it was also past my bedtime. I remember that very clearly. I was already supposed to be asleep, and we were still studying. And so I was like, I'm just going to go to bed. And then she woke me up an hour later, and she's like, why are you asleep? You should be praying to Jehovah to give you Holy Spirit to understand. And I was like, I don't know what you want from me, but I guess I'll just do whatever. And that's kind of what kept happening up until I got baptized at 11, where I didn't really understand the material that I was supposed to understand. And I also didn't really feel like it made any sense. Like, there just were too many things that didn't add up. But I went over all the questions, and I remember when I was answering them with the elders, I actually didn't know a lot of the answers that I was supposed to know. And basically the only reason I got baptized was because these elders would just give me the answers when I didn't know them. And they'd like play charades with me, trying to get me to figure out the answer without telling me the answer right out. And I was like, yeah, it was so awful.
It's not Jehovah or Jesus. It's Satan. Yeah. See, yeah. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was really bad. I remember thinking, like, I don't know any of this. There's no way they're gonna let me get baptized. And sure enough, after my last session with them, they took 10 minutes to decide, and then they called me back. And they were like, okay, well, we decided that you're ready to get baptized. And I was like, what? How did you decide that? Yeah, it was, at the time, I was like, this can't be right. Somebody must have made a mistake up there. Like, Jehovah was not, I think he got the wrong answers, and he mixed me up with someone else. But yeah, I was allowed to get baptized. And I remember I got baptized at a circuit assembly, at a one-day special circuit assembly. And this was back when we had the 1 day, the 2 day, and the 3 day.
Right.
And there was 3 of us. There was me, who was 11 at the time. There was a woman who was in her 60s, and there was a woman who was like in her 80s. And I remember as they were giving the talk, and we were getting ready to answer the questions, at the end of the talk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, I was like, something's going to happen here, and it's going to be found out that I am a fraud and I shouldn't be getting baptized here. And I was like, Jehovah's not going to let me answer these questions. I'm not going to be able to speak. I'm going to say the wrong thing. And nothing happened. And I just went through it, and I was like, well, okay. And it was a little a little disappointing actually, because I felt like something bigger was going to happen, and I felt like Jehovah was going to make it known at that time that I was not supposed to be there. And when he didn't, I was like, okay, that's weird. Oh,
So did that make you feel like maybe Jehovah wasn't involved at all?
part of me was kind of thinking something along those lines, but I wouldn't let myself like
Go there.
really think about it. Yeah, I wouldn't let myself go there. But if like in the back of my mind, I was like, well, obviously, this isn't the system that we think it is. Especially because after I got baptized, we went and had lunch because my stepdad came and he wasn't baptized. And we pretty much missed the rest of that assembly. And I was like, this isn't what a person that just got baptized should be doing. And yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I had fun. I had more fun than I would have had if I stayed at the entire assembly.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I wasn't complaining.
You got baptized. You're like, I got baptized. I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I did what I had to do. I'm done.
So your
Yeah.
your stepdad was he never involved really, or in the
No.
witnesses? No. Okay.
No, he studied periodically, but he always thought it was weird, and it never really made sense to him. He also was a little bit of like he had narcissistic tendencies himself, and so that was like a great match, him and my mom. But but the way it played out with him, because he wasn't baptized or showing an interest, it kind of made him like the brothers and sisters kind of treated him like as an outcast that wasn't welcome.
Yeah.
And he always kind of felt that coming through, and so he never did anything with the quote unquote truth.
Just kind of makes sense. Your mom has a hard time. She's hurt in a way where she can't attach well, and so she marries somebody who's a narcissist that she can't attach to.
Exactly.
It's just the way that human beings play out patterns and roles is endlessly fascinating, and at the same time very sad at times, because then you just keep repeating the same set of circumstances, and you never get what you actually need ever, and it's a shame. So you also had a sister, right? A younger sister.
Yeah.
So was she involved in the witnesses too, or was that different because she had both of them as her parents biologically?
Me and her were very different. When she was born, I was already 7 years old, and by that point, I was already feeling a lot of the stress and burden of my relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
And so when she was first born, I was pretty much like her emotional caretaker. My mom didn't really care about her baby too much. And so pretty much anytime my sister was crying, I was there to take care of her, and I was the one that was, making her feel like she had a family. But because of that, part of her always kind of felt like this need to please more than I did. And so she fit in really well with the religion, where she just kind of, as soon as she started getting older, she just already had this huge need to please, that she just did whatever she had to do to please the congregation or please my mom. And she actually got baptized when she was 10. And that was a different situation than mine, because I guess she did have more of a desire to get baptized than me. She mostly got baptized because she wanted to do cart witnessing, and the elders in our hall wouldn't let her do that until she was baptized. Yeah. And so, which to me I actually thought it was kind of good that they wouldn't let her do that, because I thought it was a bad idea to let a 10-year-old do something where they could be exposed to people that weren't necessarily friendly, which was kind of faulty reasoning, because that's what we're doing when we go to the door anyways.
Yeah.
But anyways, when she got baptized, they let her do cart witnessing, and to her, she was like, well, she felt like she was doing the right thing, because now she was getting these blessings from Jehovah, yada yada.
Well, I mean, 10-year-olds are well known for their ability to make the best decisions.
Yes, exactly.
Super well thought out, and especially when they've never been introduced to anything but one path.
Yeah.
So, if there is no choice, did you really make a choice? No, you didn't. You
exactly.
just went along with something, and it's just a shame to see people get roped in so young into this. But it makes sense, why she would, and then how it would be reinforced afterward that she felt like she was being blessed, and so that makes total sense. For yourself, after you got baptized, did you try to? I mean, there's not a lot sisters can do anyway, but did you try to pioneer or
no
do anything?
Not at all. Once I got baptized, there was like 1 month where I was like, I have the zeal of Jehovah, and I want to be out in the ministry all the time, and I want Bible studies. And then after that month was done, I was like, I'm done. Like I've reached my limit, and I'm exhausted, and I'm tired of this. And so I just kind of went back to my old way of doing things, which at the time I was in middle school, and I had friends that were not Jehovah's Witnesses, and I didn't really care about being a witness at school. I kind of tried to distance myself from that. I actually made fun of witnesses at school with my friends, and even though I had just gotten baptized, and
the games you play, I understand.
Yeah, and I was still reading these Twilight books, and even though that was definitely a no. So I mean, when we were living in California, I pretty much did not care about being a baptized individual. To me, it was like, okay, I'm baptized, but nothing's changed. I'm just still a 10-year-old kid, or not 10. I'm 12 now. I'm still a 12-year-old kid, and I don't feel like anything has changed at this point.
That's interesting. I never really thought about it because I was a brother, but sisters who get baptized, you don't have anything immediately thereafter that makes you feel any different. For a brother, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily good, but because for a brother, there's actually kind of immediate pressure. There are things you can do, and that when you're baptized at 12, you might be asked to say a prayer at one of the following meetings, which is terrifying. When you're a 12-year-old boy or whatever, and suddenly you're put under that microscope. But when you're a sister, you don't have that immediate change that makes you feel like something is different in your life, other than that you could pioneer if you wanted to, or auxiliary. But yeah, I just never thought about that, because I just sends me back to being, I guess I was 14, and just me and my friend had gotten baptized, and just the feelings of, who's going to be the first to be asked to say a prayer, and what in the world am I going to say?
Right.
And how does this work? And everyone's going to be listening to me trying to speak for everybody, and it's a lot of pressure. I understand why sisters felt left out, but there's also a lot of things that aren't super great with that responsibility either. But yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, when you're a 12-year-old girl and you get baptized, what is different? That's it.
Yeah,
You've kind of
exactly.
reached the pinnacle unless you pioneer or marry an elder.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
at that point in time, I was like, I can't do any of those because I'm still in school
Yeah, I'm
and
still
I'm a
12 years
minor,
old.
and yeah, that would be a different subject altogether. But yeah, almost as soon as I got baptized, though, I would say a couple months after that, we moved to the Big Island of Hawaii. So, which was it was very interesting the way it happened because we came here on vacation and then 6 months later we were moving because my mom had liked it so much that she couldn't imagine not living here.
Hmm.
And so she just like got it in her head and wouldn't leave the subject alone. And so we ended up moving to Hawaii and we bought a coffee farm, which was a horrible decision because neither of my parents knew what they were doing and neither of them knew how to run a business. Um,
That's a big undertaking.
yeah,
Oh my
it is.
goodness.
Yeah. They were always the type of people that wanted so badly to be self-employed, but they couldn't handle being self-employed. Like
Yeah.
they really needed somebody to be on them and, tell them what to do. Um, but anyways, they decided to buy a coffee farm. And at the time, I think I was about 13 and I was finishing up middle school, and basically we moved here, and all of a sudden it was expected that I was going to have a huge interest in coffee farming and that I was going to want to be a part of this business and that I should have all these ideas about how to make this a successful business. And I pretty much just told my parents, I was like, I don't know what you expected me. You guys decided to buy this on a whim, and I have no interest in this. So this is your thing. I'm not involved. Don't expect me to be involved. I'm going to focus on school and you guys do your thing. And that did not go over well because, because the way my parents were,
Yeah.
they had this, new project and they just expected that everyone was going to drop everything to, help them with this project.
And you're
But
13, right?
and I was 13.
Yeah.
And I was 13. And so I pretty much just set my foot down with that and I took no interest in it. Um
Can I say
we Yeah.
that's really a pretty big deal. Um, Good
Yeah.
for you for being 13 and being able to set a boundary with because you could see. I mean, you're forced to grow up pretty fast because you're managing two adults
Yeah.
that have some issues, and yeah, that's really quite impressive at 13 to be able to say, hey, you all made this decision. I didn't make this decision, so you all
Yeah.
handle this decision. Uh, Good for you. I mean, you shouldn't be in the middle of any of that,
No.
but if you have to be, good for you for not getting sucked in farther.
Yeah. And one thing that kept happening at that time was that I would get accused of being, spoiled or being ungrateful and, that basically that I was just a difficult teenager. And that was something that kept happening up until I was 19. And you know, long story short, I cut ties with my mom. Um, but for the next couple of years, that was just something that kept being reiterated that I was just a difficult teenager. And that was, something that the congregations for a time really believed about me.
Oh
And
wow!
that made it really difficult. Yeah.
So was your mom kind of bringing that narrative into the congregation?
Yeah. Not at first, but over the next couple of years, it kind of trickled more so in.
Gosh.
And, you know, because my mom had no boundaries with me, she would say something about me, out in service. And then she'd come home and she'd tell me what she'd said about me in the car group. And I I'd be thinking like, why are you telling me this if it's something bad about me that you're saying? Like, wouldn't you want to keep that hidden from me that you're, telling people negative things about me?
Ooh.
But um,
Well, you
yeah,
did cuss once when you were 10.
yeah, I did.
Or
Oh,
younger. I mean,
although nobody knew about that. Everyone thought that was a lie.
well, I'm just saying that you clearly deserved it because you cussed a couple times when you were 10, you know.
Yeah, and I made fun of witnesses,
Oh, well,
so
there you go. There you go. There you go. Wow.
definitely, yeah. um,
This
but
is
yeah,
an
when
interesting insight, though, into what it must have been like.
yeah,
Because, I mean, your mom is literally sabotaging you
oh yeah,
and telling you about it to your
yeah,
face.
yeah. I was like, why are you telling me this? Like, this is not information that you should want me to have.
Wow.
Uh, but that was also a difficult thing because she would, belittle me, but then after she would belittle me, she would, end it by saying like, "Oh, you should be grateful that you have me
Hmm.
because, I love you despite," or,
Again,
I
I
take
hate
care of
you.
you.
Don't leave me.
Exactly,
She hates
exactly.
you, but then she's gonna, and she's gonna almost like put that in your face
Yeah,
and then try to, in some really poor fashion, make it up
yeah,
to make you feel like you need her because
yeah.
she needs you.
Exactly, exactly. And so, anyways, when we moved to Hawaii, I kind of didn't have much of an interest spiritually. I commented at meetings, and at this point, I was commenting not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I had to. There was one time when I told my mom I didn't want to comment at meeting that day, and she told me, she goes, "Well, if you don't comment tonight, I'm going to take away all your books and you're never going to be able to read again and you're going to be miserable." And that to me, I was like, that's the only escape I have. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I can't let that happen. So I, commented and I kept commenting after that. And but that was pretty much the only thing I did. And it got to the point where, I was going to meetings, but I hated being there. I didn't like talking to anyone at the meetings. I pretty much only talked to my sister, who was, I think, 6 at the time, and I was 14, or maybe she was older than that. Somewhere around that age. Um, but I also didn't sing during the singing parts. I was like, I'll be here, but I'm not going to participate in anything, and other than commenting, because that has consequences.
Yeah.
And um, but around that time too, I got involved with a girl at school who was basically, she was what people would consider a bad influence, and she definitely was a bit of a bad influence. She you know wanted to smoke and take drugs, and I was like, whatever, I'm really miserable at this point in time, and so I'm like, I'll do whatever because I don't really care anymore. And I ended up making another friend who was similar, but she had a better head on her shoulders, where she was really similar to me, that she hated her home life and she was kind of miserable, but she was just kind of doing whatever she had to do to not be miserable for a little bit. And what ended up happening is I ended up cutting school a lot, to the point where the principal got involved, and they called my parents and they were like, well, your daughter hasn't been showing up to classes, and she's almost failed out of math. And so basically my mom got super upset and obviously um and she pulled me out of school, and I ended up having to do not real homeschool, but basically the school that I attended had these online courses that you could take if you fail your regular courses. So I ended up doing that for the next couple of years. And But anyways, she pulls me out of school and she takes me home and she's like, "Do you even want to be a witness anymore?" And I told her, I was like, I don't think I do. I
Yeah,
don't
now
have an
that you
interest.
ask.
Yeah. I was like, good question. No. and and that obviously wasn't the answer she expected. And she was like, "Well, too bad. You have to be a witness." And I was like, "Okay, well, you asked, so I gave you the answer." And um, we around this time we also had moved congregations, so we were in a new congregation. I had just been pulled out to do homeschooling, and my mom approached one of the elders about what was happening with me, and he told her to study the Young People Ask book with me. And
Mm-hmm.
so he gave her the book, and she came home that day and she's like, "Here, the elders say we have to study this together, so go ahead and read it, and then we'll talk about it." And I was like, "Is that really what you're supposed to do?" I was like, "Here I am. You know, I I'm crying out for help here.
Yeah.
I'm, desperate. I need a lifeline here, and you can't even be bothered to do what you think is gonna, save me for, eternally." And it was really frustrating at the time because I was like, this is the one thing you're supposed to do, and you can't even do this. And so basically, from that point on, I was like, well, I guess I have to study this book. And I tried, but I wasn't really interested in it. But I kind of just convinced myself that I was, you know, just going through a hard time, and that it wasn't really that I didn't believe in the teachings. It's just that I was going through something.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that point on, I was like, I just tried really hard to be more spiritual and to pray more than I usually did, and to meditate. And yeah, pretty much. That's
Yeah,
kind
you
of how it
doubled
went for the.
down. That's that.
Yeah,
It's a common theme. People. It can't be the belief. It must be me.
yeah,
So therefore, I'm going to double down on this thing, and make it work. It's gonna work, though we all know how it often turns out.
yeah.
Um, so how'd it go for you?
It went okay. What ended up happening is because we had just moved to a new congregation, there was one meeting that I went to and I commented, and then the next meeting I raised my hand to comment and I just couldn't comment. No words would come out of my mouth.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I was trying so hard to get something out and I just kept stuttering over all my words. And that had never happened to me before. And I was like, "Oh, sorry, I can't comment." And then that was the last time I commented, for a couple of years actually.
Wow,
And
that's fascinating.
yeah, and that to me, it was just such an embarrassing moment for me that I was like, I can't do it. And no matter how hard I tried after that, I couldn't comment. I just, here and there I could do it, but regularly I couldn't do it.
No,
It just was so much for me.
it's like your
Um,
brain, your mind and body knows that this isn't right,
yeah, yeah,
and you're trying to force it to do this thing, and it's saying, "Nah, not gonna do that." It's like how I
yeah,
used to drive to the Kingdom Hall and turn around and leave because I couldn't go
yeah,
in. It's the same thing.
exactly.
Wow.
At that time too, I was, 15 now, and I became really depressed.
Mm.
I wouldn't leave my room, and I pretty much didn't do anything. I just kind of laid in bed all day, and um, yeah, I had a hard time getting my schoolwork done. I had no interest in doing anything. I pretty much only left my room when I had to eat or when we had to go to the meeting. And other than that, I didn't really do anything else, um, for a couple of months there. And then, after a while, we had this young sister in my hall who was like maybe she was a couple years older than me, and so she started taking an interest in me, and she would invite me to her house and to do stuff, and I was like, wow, like I finally have a friend that's my age and that is a witness, and I'm allowed to spend time with her. And that kind of started pulling me out of my funk at the time, because
Sure.
I was like, okay, now I have now I have a reason to want to be involved again because my friends are involved. And so she kind of started introducing me to all the young girls in our congregation. There was about 4 or 5 of them. They were kind of already all good friends, and so they kind of invited me to be part of their clique, so to speak. And I was like, cool, I can be a part of this. And so that was nice. I felt included for the first time in like my life. And
yeah, you were what, 15, 16?
I was 15,
15?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it felt really good.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing though was she ended up moving, and shortly after she moved, she got disfellowshipped, and I was really sad because I was like, that was the first friend that I made pretty much as a witness, and she got disfellowshipped, and I was like, well, I can't talk to her, and I was, really bummed. Yeah, the funny thing was she was disfellowshipped, and I felt like I couldn't talk to her, but I was still talking to my worldly friends, like on Facebook and stuff, the ones that were a bad influence on me, I guess.
Right.
And so I was like, it was kind of weird. I was doing things that weren't right according to JWs, but I was still doing other things that were right according to them. And so anyway, she got disfellowshipped, and shortly after that, I kind of started pulling back again, and I started again because I wasn't getting any help for my mental health, and because it had been a years long thing, I really needed like professional help at this point. And I just kind of basically started getting back into it after she got disfellowship, even though I had other friends. What ended up happening is I became really close friends with one other girl in my congregation who was kind of viewed as a weirdo in the congregation. Nobody really wanted to spend time with her, and they all kind of had their own stories as to why that was. Looking back, she had a really unhealthy relationship with her mom. It was, they had no boundaries, and her mom was not a pleasant person to be around, to say the least. But I ended up, spending all my time with them, and that was kind of the only reason why I enjoyed going out in field service again, was because we would always go out in service together. But after a while, what ended up happening is we had the Awake come out about attitude. I don't know if you remember that one, if you were around for that.
I don't know. I'm sure I was, but
it was a green Awake with like a picture of a man in a wheelchair, and it had something to do about attitude. And I remember looking at that Awake, and I was like, oh my God, this article is for me. And, it's all about my attitude. And at that point in time, I was like, if I can just fix my attitude, then I'll feel better and everything will be good. Mm-hmm. And, I'm the problem here is what I was thinking. And so I ended up cutting ties with that girl because I felt like she wasn't, she didn't have in my head, I was like, she didn't really want to be spiritual. And I was like, if you don't want to be spiritual, I can't be friends with you because I'm trying to be spiritual now. And which, looking back, I really regret doing that because she was a really good friend.
Yeah.
But
such are the lines that are drawn in the congregation.
yeah. But I ended up becoming really good friends with another family in the congregation. Um, so at this point in time, my parents had sold the coffee farm because they realized it was a lot of work, and they also realized that they hated each other and they didn't want to be married to each other anymore. And so they went, at this point in time, they were going through a really ugly divorce. And
Ooh, I bet.
yeah, so ugly.
Wow.
Um, it was kind of funny because my mom, the way it played out is she convinced a judge that she was being abused, even though she wasn't being abused. Um, what she ended up doing is she ended up showing the judge some bruises that she had, but she failed to tell the judge that she got those bruises because she started hitting, and she started a fight with my stepdad. By being the first one to actually start the physical aspect of the fight. And so she played, the victim, and she was like, oh, he's so physically abusive. I'm scared for my life. And as a teenager, I was really frustrated because I didn't know how, again, there was another thing that I felt like she was getting away with, even though she wasn't really the victim here. Like, to me, I was like, you guys both are equals here. You guys are both having a big fight, and it's not one person that's being victimized. You guys are both just terrible. But she ended up getting a restraining order issued, and she would, because she felt like he was so dangerous or something. And she used to threaten me and my sister when we were bad. She would say, I'm going to go send you to live with your dad, and he's going to be mean to you, and you guys are going to hate it. So you better, be nicer to me. And I remember as a teenager, I was like, that doesn't seem like the right, discipline tactic here.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I was like, if you think this man is so terrible, why would you even consider letting your children live with him if you feared for your life?
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, so at this point in time, we moved to a different part of town. And we ended up moving pretty much right next door to another family in the congregation. And I loved them. They were, everything that I wanted growing up. They pretty much were that for me. And so it was a mom and her husband, and they had 3 kids. The oldest was a boy who had special needs, and the second oldest was a girl, and she had bipolar disorder. And then the youngest, as far as we know, she didn't have anything, but she ended up becoming like my best friend for a while.
The youngest did?
The youngest, yeah. And I was like at their house every day, and their mom was pretty much, at the time, I was like, I wish you were my parent growing up. Like, I wanted you, like, she provided everything that I felt I didn't have at home.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. And so I loved spending time with them. They weren't a particularly strong spiritual family, as you would say. They didn't go to all the meetings, and they didn't always go to service on Saturday. But to me, I was like, I didn't care because they were wonderful people. And, they made me feel like a part of their family. And
what'd that feel like? What would it feel like to feel a part of something like that?
It felt so nice. It was such a relief because not only did they make me feel a part of their family, but they also could very clearly see that something was very wrong in my house. And they pretty much from the get-go, they were like, your mom is not a great mom. But obviously they didn't say that. They just kind of, made sure that I didn't have to be at home all the
Yeah.
time because
But you knew they knew that
yeah,
you
I was
know,
like, I know that
yeah.
you know that I know that you know.
Yeah, and I mean, this goes to show you just you know, just when a person's in a situation like that, being just seen and heard and felt by other people makes all the difference in the world.
Oh yeah, it was such a huge difference. For a while there, I felt like I was like, well, my depression is cured. I don't have depression anymore. Clearly, that was wrong. But at the time, I was like, I felt so much relief over finally having somebody
Yeah.
that paid attention to me and actually showed me like real, genuine love for the first time that it was like euphoric almost. And because right before this time, basically my mom made me stay in the house all the time because she was worried that I would get hurt or that somebody would do something to me. And at the time I was like 16, and so I was stuck in the house all the time. And to the point where like I would keep all the blinds closed because I was afraid of people looking in. And
Oh, so
like
you bought into some of that paranoia.
I did.
Yeah,
I
of course
did.
you did. I mean, your mom's telling you, you're gonna believe some of that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And um, what ended up happening too is that our house became super filthy. It just, I mean, growing up, my mom was not big on cleaning up, and I kind of took that and ran with it. And I didn't know how to clean up at this time. I was like, I don't really know what that is. How do I even
Sure.
start? And this family that I became really close to, I told them, I was like, I don't know how to, clean up the house. It's just so bad. There's roaches everywhere and there's no place to sit because there's garbage everywhere. And so they were like, okay, we're going to take you home and we're going to show you how to clean up. And so we got there and they were like, oh my God, it's really bad. So they took me to the store and they were like, okay, this is what you need. This is how you use this product. And they took me home and they helped me clean up the house. And I was like, I felt really touched, but I was also kind of scared because I wasn't allowed to let anyone into the house. And so I was kind of worried that my mom was going to get home and she was going to get mad that the house was clean, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Another ridiculous thing for people to get angry at.
Exactly. And luckily, though, she didn't. She was, she thought it was wonderful. And so anyways, that kind of thing just happened regularly where I would, approach them and I'd be like, I don't know how to do this. Like, this is a basic thing I should know at this age and I don't know how to do it, and they basically taught me like how to adult.
Yeah.
And they were like, these are things you need to know by 16, 17. What are you going to do when you turn 18? Like, you can't just not know how to do laundry. And I was like, you're right. And so yeah, they taught me how to basically handle life. And I used to go out in service with them too. I would sit with them at meetings. And me and the daughter, we got really close too, where we would just, we would, text all the time and we would talk on the phone for hours together. And I was like, it felt really nice to be like, to feel like I had a family for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really great that they came into your life at that time because, to be in your older teenage years and to not know any of those basics, and it sounds like you were super isolated. So
I was.
I mean, to have them in your life, that's awesome. And it also, let's give credit, or let's just say, they were Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were loving, and they were helpful. And
although I have to say they were not viewed very well within the congregation, which is
of course not.
Exactly. It was so frustrating. These were the first people that kind of took me under their wing and really showed me love. And yet they, people viewed them poorly within the congregation, and it was really frustrating
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just reflective of, like the most narcissistic, awful people often make it to the top, and the people who are genuine and sincere seem to often be thought poorly of, and
Yeah.
it's that just makes sense, of course. But it's a shame that these people were thought of that way. I don't want to. I'm trying not to say anything that oversteps your story, or at least what I think I know of it from previous discussions. So I'm just going to let you go. So how'd things go from there?
They went wonderfully. No. So when I started my senior year of high school, I stopped homeschooling and I went back to regular school. And I did that for about a week. And then my mom found a job an hour away. And so the way the island is shaped, we have the west coast, and that's where we lived. And then you have the very tip of the island, and that's where we were moving. So it was at least an hour away from where we were at the time. And there was only one congregation there. It was really small, about 50 people again, another really small congregation. And at this point in time, we had moved from a really nice sized congregation. So even though I had been in small congregations, it still felt like shell shock, because I was like, oh, there are, a lot of older people, and it wasn't a move that I was super excited about, to say the least. But I started going to school there, and I pretty much on the weekends or after school, I would drive, because at this point I also had my own car, because we only had one car and before this, and so we needed two cars. And so I had my own car, and every weekend I would go, after meeting or after service, I'd go and spend time with this family and with my friend. And that kind of earned me a reputation within my congregation of being a partier. And
wait, what?
Yeah.
Because you were going to see a family an hour away that had a special needs child, a daughter, I think you said, who had bipolar.
Yeah.
And a young daughter. And how old was that girl that you were going to see?
She was, let's see, at this time I was 17. She was a year older than me. She was 18.
Okay, so a 17 and an 18-year-old hanging out with the 18-year-old's siblings and parents. That's a partier.
Yeah. And to be fair, it's not like we always hung out at their house. Sometimes we actually would do stuff, but...
You mean like going to clubs and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, we would go watch the brothers play basketball or something, or we would go to the beach. And, and it's, the thing is, I have always been slightly socially awkward, but at this point in time, I felt like, I felt a little bit sense of freedom, and I started coming out of my bubble a little bit. And so I was starting to get to know people, and people were inviting me to do things from other congregations. And it's like I was still hanging out with other Jehovah's Witnesses, but for some reason, the congregation that I was in did not like for you to hang out with other Jehovah's Witnesses unless it was from this congregation.
Sure, because the us versus them even extends within the congregations.
Yes. So they were fine, if one or two people came and visited the congregation, but they really didn't like it for you to miss meeting so that you could go to a different congregation's meeting. Gosh. And it's like I'm still going to the meeting, but I would get in trouble for not attending my meeting. And so that kind of went on for about a year. I graduated from high school, and pretty much by the time I was done with high school, I was burnt out. I was so exhausted from not only the JW stuff, but also because of the way I had gone through high school. I had only done my core classes up until senior year. So that meant I had to get like 7 credits my senior year. And actually, not 7 credits. I had to get 10 credits my senior year, which is more than there are classes in a day.
Ooh.
And so I was just exhausted. I was going to school full time, and I was taking classes online so that I could meet my requirement to graduate on time. And I was going out of service and, going to meetings. And, I was also hanging out with people and having a social life. And so by the time I graduated, I was really just burnt out. And yeah, but anyways, I graduate and I immediately get offered a job by my landlord, because she knows I'm a witness, and she thinks, she's met me once, and I kind of go and interview with her, and she's like, oh, I think you're perfect for the job. You are friendly, and I need someone to run my smoothie stand, and you seem like a good fit. And I was like, okay, cool, I have a job now. And that was a week after I graduated, and I was like, I guess I'm not going to get a break. And because originally I had planned on taking a couple weeks to go to Maui, to a neighboring island with my friend. I guess I should give her a name because she comes up a lot. Let's call her, damn, I can only think of her real name. Jessica. Let's call her Jessica.
Okay.
So anyways, I'm planning on going to Maui with Jessica. That ends up not happening. And so I start working at the smoothie place, like right after I graduate from high school. And I tell my mom, I was like, I want to pioneer, but I think I want to wait a year. And I want to spend the year auxiliary pioneering, because I don't feel like I'm ready to be a full-time pioneer. And when I told her that, she was not happy about that. She told me, she's like, either you're a full-time pioneer or you work full-time, or that's it. You can't have both. And
Good grief.
I was like, what do you mean I can't like work part-time and also pioneer part-time? So it was frustrating, because I was like, this is something that should be coming from me, and I should be, it's like, anyways, we go over to an elder's house at some point, and she tells the elder, and at this point, this elder had become like my father figure essentially, and so I really respected what he had to say. And so she told him, she's like, well, she kind of told him her version of the story, and he sided with her because she pretty much lied about what I said. And I was like, okay, well, if this elder thinks that I should pioneer right away, then I guess I need to pioneer. And so also at this point in time, I'm also planning my graduation party, because my mom insisted that I have a graduation party, but she didn't actually want to plan it.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah. And so when I first started my senior year, I told her, I was like, I don't want a party, because it's just not for me. I just don't want that pressure. And I'd rather just have a nice dinner with everyone that I care about, and then just, that's it. And of course, that wasn't good enough. So I had to plan my own graduation party while I'm trying to start pioneering, and I'm also trying to work part-time. And it was, and I'm also trying to finish up school. So that kind of all overlapped for a good month or so. And it was a lot of pressure to get it all done. And anyways, that kind of wraps up. And for the summer, I decided that I want to start pioneering at the beginning of the service year in September. So for the summer, I auxiliary pioneer. And that was actually a lot of fun because we had two uh, kids, I guess, in the congregation who were my age, and they were brother and sister, and they were both already pioneering, like 70 hours. And so I just kind of, when I didn't work, I went out in service, and it wasn't bad. Like I actually enjoyed it because
You were
I went
hanging
out in
out.
service with friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And anyways, that wraps up at the end of the summer, and I had to start regular pioneering. And as soon as I started regular pioneering, like a lot of stuff started happening at once. And at the time, I felt like it was Satan trying to attack me for,
Yep.
pioneering.
Of course. Yep. And that's what we were told.
Yeah. Now I realize I just had a terrible parent. But so I start the service year and I start pioneering, and at this point I had a couple in the congregation ask me to house sit for them for a couple of weeks, and their house was right next to the Kingdom Hall, and I was stoked. I was like, okay, well, I can, it's a nice way to kind of see how I like living on my own, and and I can be closer to the Kingdom Hall, and it was just perfect. And at the same time, one of my good friends was moving to China because she was getting engaged and her fiance lived in China already. So, and at the same time, my friend who had bipolar disorder ended up in the hospital for a ruptured appendix.
Oh, wow.
And so she was in the hospital for a week, and I couldn't see her because I lived so far away, and it was just hard to make time to go see her. So anyways, I'm house sitting and I'm pioneering, and then my friend is moving, so she has a going away party that me and my family is invited to. And so I told my mom, I was like, okay, the party is on Sunday. If you guys could please, get dressed and for meeting and bring your clothes, and you can get changed here with me, and I'll have lunch ready for you. And then we can just leave so that I can go visit my friend in the hospital, and then we can go to the party. And so I get to the meeting, and my mom tells me, she's like, okay, well, we're going to go back home now, and we're going to get changed and have lunch, and then we'll see you in an hour or so. And at the time, it was very frustrating because I had gone over this whole plan several times with her because it was so important to me to try and make time to see my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, there's nothing I can do. They don't have clothes, whatever. And so anyways, they come back, we have lunch, and then we leave. And as we're driving to the party, she tells me, well, I don't really want to go to the party anymore. So you can just take your sister, and I'm going to go do my own thing. And then I'll take the car, and you guys can just get a ride back with someone else. And I was very frustrated because I had told her that I had plans after the party, that I was going to go to the party, and then I was going to meet up with a friend. They could have my car, her and my sister, to drive back. And then they could, stop at the house, pick up their car, and then go home. And I was like, I tried to explain to her, I was like, I can't do that. I already have plans. I can't watch my sister because I have plans. And like to her, she just exploded right there about how I was, ungrateful, and how she does so much for me, and she just needs one day to herself. And so at this point, I was like, I had a year, well, actually more. I had years of like anger and frustration building up, and I just exploded at her. And she ended up making me stop on the highway and getting out and making my sister get out. And she was like, okay, well, I'm going to walk home then. And I was like, this is a highway. You can't have a kid walking on the highway. That's dangerous. And I felt I felt like responsible for this happening. So I called my friend Jessica, and I'm crying on the phone with her, and I'm telling her what happened. And she tells me to call the elders, and the elders will handle it. And then to just come and get ready at her house, and then she'll drive both of us to the party. And so I call this elder that I'm really close to, and I'm crying on the phone, and I leave him a voicemail. And then he calls me back later, and at first he takes my side, and he's like, yeah, we kind of noticed that your mom has some problems getting along with people, and such and such, but we didn't think it would get to this point. And so at first I'm feeling like, okay, the elders are on my side. They're finally going to help me in this, situation. And so at first I'm feeling good. And then a couple days pass, and this elder calls me back, and he says, well, we talked to your mom, and, we kind of had a different side of the story now. And so basically, to cut the story short, now they kind of heard my mom's side, and they felt like I was just a difficult teenager. Mm-hmm. And so they were like, well, and so I go and talk to this elder, and he tells me, well, when you're 18, I understand you want your freedom, and you don't necessarily want to listen to your parents, and you just want to be your own person. And I was frustrated because I remember thinking, I was like, where does this come from? I told you clearly what was happening on the phone, and that, that this was just a recurring issue that I kept having, and it's
but
not
an adult
just
with more power.
Yeah.
They respect authority, they respect age and things
Yeah.
like that. So an adult said that it was a certain way, so therefore it was.
Yeah. Exactly. And so at this point, I'm feeling kind of isolated from my congregation because I'm pioneering, but I feel like I don't really have their support because of what I'm going through.
Sure.
And so I kind of start spending even more time with this family than I was originally when I first moved up here. And that also caused problems again, because I'm not spending enough time with my congregation, which it's not like they ever did anything other than meetings and field service. So, but anyways, I'm spending more time with this family, and eventually my mom gets fed up with it and starts telling the elders that they're terrible and that I shouldn't be able to spend time with them, and that they're just out to get her and they don't like her, and they're filling my head with ideas, and that's why I'm being so difficult. And so the elders go ahead and call the other congregation that this family belongs to, and they start talking to them. They're like, oh, what is this family like? And basically those elders told them that they weren't a spiritual family, and that I needed to get better friends. And I didn't find this out until much later, but it kind of started to make sense as to why immediately after that they kind of started telling me that I needed to stop hanging out with them, and that I, needed to get better friends, and that I needed to spend more time with people in my congregation, and especially this one elder's wife, who was the wife of my father figure, but she was a piece of work in herself.
Can I ask, how did that one elder become your father figure?
I don't really know. He just kind of did.
I mean, did he talk to you a lot at the meetings, or it sounds like you all were really cool with each other. How did that kind of form? Just naturally through the congregation, or did you all hang out?
Oh, that's right. I forgot about this. Almost as soon as we moved to this town, my mom got into a fight with our landlord, and basically we moved out and we didn't have a place to live. And so this elder and his wife let us stay at their house for 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah. And during that course of time, they kind of, I don't know, I just became really close to him because he had a very gentle way of speaking, and he was very calm, and obviously because I didn't get that at home, I really appreciated that in
Oh
somebody
yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And he didn't, but in those 2 or 3 months, they didn't see who your mom really was.
No, because she worked a lot and
Uh,
she is good about kind of camouflaging herself
she knows
for
what
a
to
little bit.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, she
She
does
knows
know what
what's
to do.
expected. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she was a good guest. And
Yes.
so from that point, she became really good friends with his wife. His wife and my mom got along so well. And to the point where when I started having these problems with my mom, she started really like getting on my case about being a better daughter. And basically, anytime I tried to talk to her about what was happening at home, she would brush me off and say, you're just exaggerating this stuff. And, we all have problems with our parents. You just need to. Basically, she ended up telling me more than once that I needed to be more spiritual.
Okay.
And
So I've
yeah,
never I've never lived in the outside world as far as, as a kid growing up.
yeah,
And obviously neither have you.
no.
Is it normal in the world at large to have so many people up in your business? And
I, yeah,
it's insane to have like one set of elders calling another set of elders to ask about the spiritual qualifications of the family that you're going and hanging out with, and then having like all these people like involved with your mom and everything, and like telling you to be a better daughter and all this. Like, what kind of like it's like Mayberry or something, like Andy on
yeah.
the Andy Griffith show, like all these small town people up in everybody's business. It's really weird.
It
It
was weird.
I don't know if that exists on the outside much anymore, or not, in other people's families growing up, but it just seems really weird. And it's definitely boundary crossing.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Um, I remember feeling like it was weird because I just felt like there was just too many people involved. And
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
yeah, and it was kind of funny because my mom always had a big problem with involving other people in our business. And here she was involving other people in our business.
Of
And
course.
yeah, and I was like, okay, well, if they're on your side, then it's fine, I guess.
Right.
And so, anyways, I start spending time with this family more so than I am. I'm getting a lot of heat from it for it from my elders, and this kind of brings me and the daughter even closer. Like we kind of start having this idea like we are being kept apart and nothing's going to stop us from spending time with each other. And at the time I was like, we're really good friends. We're such good friends. And now that I've been out and I've kind of had time to think about my life and who I am, I realized what was actually happening, at least on my side, was that I had actually developed feelings for this girl. And like, so to me, I was like, in my mind, I'm like, we're star-crossed lovers. And, the elders are trying to keep us apart, but I'm not going to let that happen. And so even though the elders kept telling me to not spend time with them, I was like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I'm too emotionally involved, and I'm not going to stop being friends with someone just because you don't like them.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is I tried to spend time with the family, but it ended up being more so me and the daughter, Jessica, who were kind of we would take any opportunity to see each other or talk to each other. And, but after a while, this ended up happening for a couple of months. And after a while, it started taking a toll on me physically. And I ended up getting really depressed again to the point where I wasn't able to get out of bed. And I ended up having to call out of work a lot because I felt like there was something physically wrong with me. Like I was, somehow I had gotten sick and I didn't know what it was. And I kept going to the doctor and they didn't know what it was either. And so I ended up calling out of work a lot and missing a lot of work and missing a lot of service. And basically, I wasn't able to get my 70 hours in pretty much the whole time I was a pioneer. And so what ends up happening is there's this one sister in that congregation who I was actually really close to because she was in her mid-20s and she had married the son of my father figure. And she was really cool because she was from Europe and she was like one of the coolest people I ever met. And we had really similar senses of humor. And so basically neither of us paid attention at meeting and we just kind of laughed and made jokes with each other and, just didn't pay attention. And I was like, I can have a friend if the friend is like this. And, but anyway, she ends up telling me the same thing, that I need to really decide what type of friends I'm going to have if I want to be a pioneer. And at the time, I felt like it was a little bit strange the way she worded it, but that ended up happening a lot where now the elders were telling me that if I wanted to be a pioneer, I needed to choose my friends wisely.
Yep.
And so I started
use it against you.
Yeah. So I started getting the message that if I wanted to stay a pioneer, that I couldn't be friends with these people. And, that they were going to remove me as a pioneer.
These people who are Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah. And it's not like they did things that were against the rules. They shunned people that were disfellowship. They didn't celebrate holidays. They were adequate Jehovah's Witnesses, I guess,
But they weren't examples.
Yes,
and you're
exactly.
a pioneer now, and you're supposed to be an example to the congregation. Yep. So you've got to start hanging out with the cut above people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so this sister that tells me that she's a pioneer, and her husband's a pioneer, and he's a ministerial servant. And so basically, she says, we should be the type of people that you have as friends. Ugh. And so
that's so gross.
And she's like, we want to invite you to more things, but we never feel like we can because you're always hanging out with this other family. And in my head, I was like, I hang out with this family because they actually invite me to do stuff and they actually want to spend time with me. If you invited me to something, I would go, but you never actually invite me to something. And so again, I start kind of having this message being told to me that I need to step it up as a pioneer. And at the time, I still didn't want to listen. I was like, this still doesn't make sense. I don't understand why you guys are being this way. And I just kind of ignored what they were saying. At one point, the fighting between me and my mom had gotten so bad that we had to have an elders meeting with 2 elders. And during this meeting, my mom lost her temper with me and she started screaming at me in front of these 2 elders. And I remember thinking, I was like, okay, now they're going to see what she's really like when I'm at home by myself with her. And they don't really do anything. She starts screaming at me. I start yelling back because, that's just what you do in that situation. And, then the elders kind of try and, use their wonderful therapy skills on us because they're so highly trained. But they kind of start trying to see what the root cause of the issue is. And at this point, I decided I'm going to tell them about something that happened when I was 10. Because when I was 10, I had a really traumatic incident with my mom. Basically, what happened was my mom got drunk and started hitting my sister, who was 3 or 4 at the time, really, really badly. And it got so bad that I had to lock me and my sister in the bathroom. And my mom kept, pounding at the door for hours, yelling at us about how horrible we were. And, it was really scary, to the point where if I had had access to a phone, I would have called the cops.
Oh, sure.
But
yeah.
And so this happened on a Saturday, and the next day was Sunday, meeting day. And the next morning, when my sister woke up, she was covered in bruises all over her body. And I remember my mom telling us that we weren't going to go to the meeting because she didn't want anyone to think that something bad had happened to my sister.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so upset at the time. I mean, I'm still, even thinking about it now, it's an upsetting memory. But
it's upsetting to me, and I wasn't there.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing to do. So I decided I'm going to tell the elders about this, because at this point it's been 8 years and I've been holding on to this incident for years, and it's just really painful. And so, I go ahead and I go into crazy detail about what happened that night. And the elders look at each other and they turn back to me, and one of the elders was actually the elder that was my father figure.
Mm-hmm.
And he turns to me and he goes, well, sometimes people do bad things, but it doesn't mean that they're evil. And we just have to learn how to forgive them, because that's what Jehovah wants. and I remember I was being so deflated, because here I was for 8 years holding on to this. And I had been thinking that once the elders knew about this, that they would do something about it. And, I was thinking Jehovah's going to finally fix this. And I'm, something's finally going to get done. And nope, nothing happened. And I remember at one point during that meeting, my mom turned to me and she said, "Oh, you're still bringing that up?"
Oh, God.
I apologize for that. And I turned to her and I was like, "You've never once apologized for that." And finally she turns to me, she's like, "Okay, well, I'm sorry." And and this was all happening in front of the elders, and still they did nothing. And
who cares if she apologized for
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Oh, well then, okay, that's right. You didn't beat the crap out of my little sister, like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And who are these people who are suddenly concerned with forgiveness? They shunned people.
Yeah, exactly. But the reason they cared was because my mom was still an active witness, and she was still going to meetings and still going on service and still commenting.
I'm just surprised that you being a pioneer didn't get you any deference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even at the time, I was like, well, so much for being a pioneer. This sucks. And, but yeah, I was really frustrated. I left that meeting and I was, so upset.
Oh,
I was like, well, after that meeting, I was like, well, I guess that I'm stuck in this situation. I don't know how to get out of it. And at this point in time, this family that I was really close to was also trying to get me to move out, because they knew the emotional toll that living with my mom had taken. And, they were like, if you want to move out, we'll let you live with us until you want to find a different place. You can stay here as long as you want. And, we love you and you're part of our family, and, we will take care of you like our own. And we don't care if, she comes after us, we will fight for you. And I so badly, up until that point, I wanted to take them up on their offer. And after that meeting, though, I was like, well, it was so deflating that I just felt like I was stuck with my mom and that I couldn't leave. And
you were a legal adult, right?
I was a legal adult. I was 18 at that point.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I was 18. And
Not that that necessarily matters in these
right.
matters, but
Yeah.
I was just saying, just trying to make sure I had the timeline right.
Yeah. But again, they still viewed me as just being a difficult teenager,
Yeah.
even though I had told them, you know, of these things that had been happening at home. And, you know, they still didn't do anything about it. And so, that happens. That things kind of keep going on this way for a couple of weeks, a couple of months maybe, I don't remember. And I end up, the assembly comes up, and we're supposed to go to the assembly with this family, my father figure and his wife, because we go to the assembly with them every time. And the night before the assembly, my mom comes into my room and she tells me, well, we're not going to go to the assembly. And if you want to go, you can find your own way. And I was like, you're not even, at the time I remember thinking, like, you're going to punish yourself spiritually because you're mad at me. And that was like, she did that so regularly that I didn't understand why the elders didn't get involved, because here she was, you know, doing things that were bad spiritually, and yet still nothing was happening. And so I go to the assembly by myself, and I end up having a wonderful time because I don't have to, you know, be around my mom.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, and I end up sitting with my friends, which I've never been able to do. And, you know, we have lunch, and then after the assembly, we all grab dinner, and I'm having like this really nice time. I'm getting to know people that I haven't previously gotten to know very well. And I just, you know, it was a wonderful day. And then I start driving home, and halfway home, it's about 7 at the time. So it's around 7 p.m. It's not even dark outside. And I start getting all these voicemails from my mom about how, you know, I'm out all night and I don't even call. And, you know, I don't. And then the last voicemail she left me, she said, don't even bother coming home. You're not welcome here. And so I was like, okay, I just got kicked out. Wonderful. And for going to the assembly, mind
Good
you.
Lord. Yeah, this is, yeah.
And so.
And you just see the disorder at work.
Yeah, I did. And so I ended up calling one of my other good friends who's, she lives in a town about half an hour away from me. And I tell her, I'm like, well, I just got kicked out. Can I come stay at your place? And she's like, sure, whatever. And so I go ahead and I do that. And then I end up calling the elders, and I'm telling them, like, this is what's happening. I just got kicked out. I don't know what to do. And I'm told that I need to go stay with one of the elders in my congregation. That I can't just stay with, you know, my friend. It has to be with someone in my congregation.
Why?
And yeah. So
these people are nuts.
I know. It was so frustrating. And so I end up going to stay with my father figure and his wife. And they have another brother staying with them who has like a physical disability. And I only say that because it comes up later. But he and my father figure end up going to visit my mom the next day to try and see what's going on, because she hasn't been answering anyone's calls and she's basically isolated herself. And they show up there, and this brother knows that my mom's first language is Spanish, and so he starts talking to her in Spanish because he's like, maybe she'll be more receptive in Spanish. And she ends up insulting him and basically making fun of his disability and slamming the door on their faces. And I was like, okay, now people are going to see what she's like now that this has happened. I go and stay with my father figure's son and his wife for a couple of days. And then what ends up happening is my mom calls the elders and tells them that, you know, she kicked me out because I didn't call her after the assembly. And she was so worried about me, and she didn't know if something had happened to me. And in my head I was thinking, so you kick me out so
Yeah.
that you don't know what's happening to me and I could get in trouble, and then after that happens, the elders, well, this one elder who's my father figure comes to me and he says, well, you never told me about that you didn't call her. And I look at him and I was
What
like,
does
what
that
difference
matter?
does it make?
Good grief. Who are these
Yeah.
people?
Yeah. I was like, why does that matter? And so, anyways, long story short, they end up telling me that I can either move back in or I can stay with them for a little bit. It's up to me. So they're technically giving me a choice, but they make it more than clear that what they're suggesting is that I go back to stay with my mom. And, I'm in tears and I'm crying. I'm saying, I don't want to go back. I'm scared. Please don't make me go back. And, they keep telling me, they're like, oh, she's your mom, and
Yeah,
sorry,
and
tough
that's what
luck,
it comes
kid.
down to. It's the
Yeah.
authority. God, I hate them.
Yeah, I hate them.
It makes me so mad.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make any sense, and it's just an appeal to authority,
Yeah.
even if that authority is abusive.
Yeah.
Which is why they love their God Jehovah, because he's an abusive, horrible God, and they
Yeah.
appeal to that authority.
Mhm.
Wow.
So anyways, I moved back in with my mom, and at this point, I feel so deflated, and I feel like no matter how much I pray to Jehovah about what's happening, nothing, like, I'm not getting any sense of relief here, and things just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And I end up going on a trip to a neighboring island with a sister. And when I come back, I get really sick. So, so sick, where I don't really know what it was. I think I got the flu, but I get the flu and it kind of never goes away. Like, I'm so stressed out that I cannot physically recover from this sickness. And so anyways, at this point in time, I end up calling my friend Jessica and telling her, like, well, this is what the elders have been telling me, and it's been really difficult. And, for one day, I thought maybe they had a point and maybe I should stop being friends with you. But, I realized I was dumb. And she ends up getting so upset about that for one day I could have doubts about our friendship. And basically she stops talking to me and I don't hear from her for about 2 or 3 weeks. And so this is right before my trip, and then I come back and I have to deal with all this drama with my friend. And I'm trying so hard to explain to her, like, it's not that I really had these doubts, like, I still care about you and I still want to be friends and I don't care what people are saying. But after that happened, our friendship never really recovered. It kind of just, like, we just kind of stopped being good friends after that. We were still friends, but we weren't close after that.
And this is Jessica, right?
Jessica, yeah.
That's such a shame.
Yeah. It was a real bummer because I was, at this point, like, looking back on it, I realized, like, I'm, like, not only is she my best friend, but I'm also, like, in love with her too. And to basically be shot down and told, like, I don't want to be friends with you because you have a moment of weakness, it was so difficult.
Well,
And
in a moment, I mean, you had fought through so much to be in a relationship with these people, and there's just a recurring theme that seems to be you're either in or out.
Yeah.
And if you're not all in, then clearly you must be all out. It's a really unfair way to have relationships.
Yeah. It was not fun. Um, at this point, and it was difficult because I felt like, well, here's another area where I'm lacking. I can't even be a good friend. And so that kind of sunk me further into my at at this point I'm also like super depressed too. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that plays a part into my, sickness too. Like I have the flu, I'm super depressed,
Yep.
and it just never goes away for a couple of months. And um I end up, coming to the mom of my friend Jessica, and I'm crying with her, and I'm telling her, like, this is what's happening and I don't know what to do. And basically she tells me, she's like, well, she's a drama queen and she'll get over it. So, and she kind of sides with me, and it makes me feel so much better because I'm like, finally somebody
Yeah.
here is on my side. And um anyways, my friend who moved to China ends up getting married. I go to the wedding, and um, right before the wedding, I spend some time with my friend Jessica, and the whole time it just kind of feels like she's, ignoring me, not really in the moment the way it used to be. And I end up having this huge breakdown on the way home, and I end up calling another good friend of mine who's been on the podcast. His name is Nico. And I start crying on the phone with him. And I'm like, I don't think, she cares about me. And I'm really sad. I don't know what to do. And I end up crying on the phone with him for like 3 hours. And, um, anyways, she ends up apologizing and basically, trying to smooth things over. But again, nothing really went back to the way it was. And which became a really big issue because I really felt like it was the elders who were responsible for that. And even though I was still pioneering at this point and I was still trying to be a good Jehovah's Witness, I blamed the elders for my relationship with this girl disintegrating. And I was really mad at them for it. And anyways, things keep going on this way for another while. And I end up kind of trying to move on from that. And I end up spending a lot more time with my friend Nico. And because he's in the same congregation as me, and I'm allowed to hang out with him because he's not only a Jehovah's Witness, but he's in my congregation. So I'm like, okay, this will finally be someone that I can hang out with and I won't, be in trouble for. I end up getting in trouble for hanging out with him because he's a boy and I can't hang out with a boy, and because if you're friends with a boy, that's inherently bad. And it was hard too because I was like, I'm still trying to get over this other person. And it's like, I feel like I'm in a conflict here where I'm like, I don't really know what anyone is expecting of me here. And, it kind of feels like I'm just not supposed to have friends at all. And so I'm spending time with him, and he would come over to my house, and my mom would be okay with it because at least now I'm spending time at home. And anyways, we end up becoming really, really good friends for a while. And at this point in time, he ends up asking out my friend Jessica. And I was like, at that time, I was still super depressed. And I remember being like, oh, here's another thing that's going to go wrong. Because I was like, it has to be this friend that I'm still trying to get over. And it's like, I don't want her to start dating you. And of course, I don't realize it at the time, but it's like, I want her to date me, but that's not going to happen because we're Jehovah's Witnesses. Mm-hmm. And you can't be gay. But anyways, that ends up not working out. And me and Nico end up becoming really tight again. and we start dating after a while. And at this point, I'm pretty much over my friend, and I'm like, I just want to have a close relationship with someone, and I just need to have someone in my life that's not going to turn their back on me when, things go bad. And anyways, we start dating, and I start to get shunned by my friends because they do not think that I should be dating Nico. So their first instinct is to start shunning me instead of talking to me and being like, hey, we don't think you should be doing this.
Right.
So I
use your words, people.
Yeah, exactly. So I start feeling a lot of pressure, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Here I am. I'm losing all my friends for something that seems trivial to me, as like who I'm dating. And the funny thing is, it was actually going fairly well. Like, we were seeming to be kind of compatible, and like it was a new relationship, but I was like, this could actually be something good. And yet, because I'm 18 at the time, basically all my friends tell me, no, you can't do that, and we're not going to be friends with you if you do that. And my friend Jessica starts kind of, wanting to be better friends with me, and all of a sudden she's, showing me more attention than she showed me in a while. And it starts to feel like the old times with her, and it's a little confusing because she knows that I'm dating someone else, and yet now she chooses to start trying to be my friend again, and it makes me really confused. And it was a time of like extreme confusion for me. And anyways, I decide that I want to date Nico, and it whatever, it doesn't matter. And we end up basically doing something we weren't supposed to do together in my mom's house. And we end up getting frisky with each other. And because I'm also feeling the pressure from my friends, I end up feeling a lot of guilt over this. And I'm talking on the phone with my friend, and she tells me I need to go to the elders. And then my sister ends up coming into my room, and she's like, I know everything that happened, and I heard your phone call, and you're terrible, and I hate you. And that was like pretty much word for word what she said. And it was so frustrating because I was like, I can't have this from somebody that is in my own house and that I care about so much. And then my mom finds out because my sister tells her, and she, goes crazy about it, obviously. And, then she ends up calling the elders, and she tells them, she's like, well, this is what my daughter's been doing this, and you need to come over right now. And so the elders show up, and of course, it's my father figure and his son. And they end up, talking with me outside without my mom. And they ask me, they're like, oh, what happened? And I tell them. And
is your father figure's son, you say he's an elder, or is he a servant?
He ends up becoming an elder, yes. So about a year into knowing him, he became an elder.
Okay, because I was just wondering why he was there otherwise. But okay.
Sorry, yeah, I totally forgot about that. He became an elder. And even before he was an elder, though, he was pretty much an elder. Sure. But
so they start grilling you.
They start grilling me, and they start asking me all these questions, obviously. And so then they tell me, they're like, well, we're going to have a judicial committee with you, and you're not going to be a pioneer anymore. And what's funny about that is that I had actually come to the elders a couple of months back because I had told them I didn't want to be a pioneer anymore. And they told me that that was dumb and I needed to be a pioneer.
I had that happen too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
like they
like,
won't take it. They won't let you step down.
Yeah. So anyways, I had this judicial committee. Before I have my committee, they tell me you're not allowed to talk to Nico. And so I listen and I don't talk to him. And I have my committee and it's so uncomfortable because there's this man that I consider to be like my dad and his son, who's like my brother, and some other random elder that I don't really know very well. And it's really uncomfortable because they're asking me a lot of really personal questions and wanting like explicit detail about what happened, how many times it happened, where it happened, you know, did I like what happened? Was I the one to start it or did he start it? And, you know, I kind of, for the most part, I went into that meeting and I was in tears. And looking back on it now, I realized that what was happening is I went into that meeting with the intention of coming out alive, essentially. Like I was going to go in and I was just going to say what I needed to not get disfellowshipped. And so I was like, I told him what happened, but I also told him, I was like, I feel sorry. I'm so sorry. Like I disappointed Jehovah, blah, 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 blah. And the truth is I really didn't feel that bad about it. I just felt pressure from a lot of people to come out and talk about this, basically.
Sure.
But anyways, they, you know, put me outside and they tell me that they're going to talk and come to a decision. And I'm out there for only a couple of minutes. And while I'm out there, I try to pray because I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. And they call me in when I'm in the middle of a prayer. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to stop praying here. Jehovah understands. And I felt really bad after I heard Nico's side of things because I was like, it was so different. You know, I I shut down emotionally during that time. And anyways, they brought me back into the meeting and they tell me we have decided not to disfellowship you, but we're going to privately reprove you. And, you know, you can't comment. And that was pretty much it. I couldn't comment. And it was kind of funny because I wasn't commenting before this happened either, even though I was a pioneer. And so to me, I thought, well, that's fine. I don't want to comment anyways. And so I get privately reproved, and during the meeting they tell me right after they tell me that I'm privately reproved, they tell me that again I need to think about my friends and what type of friends I'm going to have, and if I think that this family is really a good friendship to have now that I've been reproved. And so to me, it kind of felt
so
like,
weird.
okay,
They're still going back to that family.
They are.
They're obsessed.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I understand. And to me, I was thinking, okay, if I hang out with this family, there's a possibility I could get disfellowship for real. And so again, I kind of just start shutting down emotionally, just completely. And right before this happened, I actually ended up losing my job too, because I couldn't go into work because I was so sick all the time. And so it kind of felt like things were just kind of like, I felt like I was hitting rock bottom essentially. And so I get reproved and I'm not supposed to hang out with this family. So my mom takes it upon herself to send a really nasty text to them and tell them that I'm not going to be talking to them, blah, blah, blah. And the mom texts me and she says, we got this text from your mom. Is this true? And I tell them, I was like, I'm sorry, but yeah, it's true. I can't spend time with you guys anymore. And they were like, okay, we understand, but we'll be here for you no matter what. And so now I'm reproved. The one family that I feel has always been on my side, I'm not allowed to talk to them anymore. I don't even have, my friend Nico anymore because he's been disfellowshipped and I can't talk to him. And so I just kind of feel like there's nothing left. And I don't, I just feel so miserable at this point. And a couple weeks after I get reproved, we have our convention, our 3-day convention come up. So I go to the convention, and the second day that I'm there, I run into the mom from this family that I'm really close to, and I tap her on the shoulder, and I have, in my mind, I'm thinking I need to apologize to her for being a terrible friend and a terrible daughter. And she looks at me and she asks me, she's like, are you okay? And I just start crying, and I just have a breakdown at the convention. And she gives me a hug, and she just kind of pats me, and she was kind of the first person to do that for me in this whole time that all of this has been happening. And anyways, my mom ends up finding me. She ends up yelling at me for embarrassing her, and she's like digging her nails into my arm. And so I yank myself away, and of course I get in trouble for being disrespectful to my mom. And her other daughter ends up finding me later on and telling me that she cares about me and that she's always going to be there for me too, and she hopes that I'm okay, and yada yada, and just like being a good friend. And this one of the elders at my hall, who was the son of my father figure, he ends up coming up to me and telling me that I need to think about my mom, and I need to think about how she's enjoying the convention, and if I should not be spending time with these people at the convention, even if they're the ones approaching me, because it could ruin my mom's time at the convention. And it actually made me really upset, because here I am, I just had an emotional breakdown at the convention where I'm supposed to be, they always talk about how you're going to be encouraged.
Yeah.
And yet he's telling me that I need to worry about my mom and not be selfish.
These people are insane.
Yeah.
The amount of obsession they have over your mom's feelings, it almost makes you want, it's almost like they're having a relationship with her. This is very strange.
Yeah. It was really frustrating. Wow. So anyway, she ends up leaving the convention early, the day at least, and she goes back to the hotel. And me and my sister stayed for the rest of the day. We go and have dinner with, my father figure and his wife, and we just have a really lovely evening. And it was actually like, what keeps happening throughout my life is that anytime I have some distance from my mom, I end up feeling a million times better.
Yeah.
And so it's like, even though I just had a breakdown, I feel so much better when she's gone. And then they dropped me off at the hotel, and I had to go face my mom. And she's pissed, to say the least. And she just starts telling me about how I ruined the convention for her, how just the same things over and over again, how I'm selfish, and she regrets having me, that I've never done anything good for her ever. And, and then she takes it a step further and says that I ruined the convention for everyone else too, and that they've all been talking to her and telling her how much they basically how upset they are with me. And then she brings up a good friend of mine who's in this congregation, and she says, "Yeah, well, your friend, she texted me and she said that she liked you a lot better when before you graduated because you were less selfish." And I, to this day, I don't know if that was an actual thing that happened or if she just made that up to hurt me. But either
Probably
way,
made it up.
yeah, either way, the intention was obvious that she used that to hurt me.
Yeah.
And so she tells us that we're gonna go home early and we're gonna miss the last day. And I agree, whatever. And I just kind of go to sleep for the whole way back home. And when I get home, I decide that the next day, which is at this point a Monday, the day after the convention, I decide that it would be better for everyone if I wasn't around anymore. So, at this point, because I've been depressed for a really long time, I've kind of accumulated a lot of bottles of, prescription medication in my medicine cabinet. And I decide that I'm just gonna, take a drive up to the park, and I'm just gonna end it at that point. And what happens is this man who's my father figure, he texts me and invites me to go to his farm because he has a farm, and I was helping him out periodically over there. And so he texts me and invites me to come over, and I tell my mom that that's where I'm going to be, but instead I go to the park. And I end up stopping at the pharmacy too and pick up some more things there. And by the time I actually start doing what I was doing, was around 3 o'clock. And it wasn't until 11 that night that somebody actually found me. And so anyways, what ends up happening is it gets to be around dinner time and I still haven't come home. So my mom texts this family and asks them what's going on, if I stayed over for dinner or what's happening. And they tell her that I never showed up. And I end up getting, they file a missing persons report on me, essentially. And I start getting a lot of text messages from a lot of people that are wondering where I'm at and to please call them back. There was a lot of people that were really wonderful in what they were saying. But one person, which was this elder's wife, texted me and told me that I needed to start thinking about my mom and my sister, and I shouldn't be doing what I was doing because it was selfish. And I was like, that is not what you should be texting me right now.
No.
It was really hard to hear that when I'm at my lowest point here.
Yes, and everything has been made about your mom. I mean, This is the most abusive. I mean, the way she makes everything about her, and then everyone follows suit. It's almost like borderline personality disorder by proxy. It's like they've picked it up somehow, and they're captivated and doing the same thing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, she's putting everything on you, and everyone's putting everything on you. So, of course, you feel like you feel. It's only natural.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then they make it worse by texting you in the middle of it.
Yeah, and not even saying encouraging things, which
No.
other people were actually doing that, which I was really touched after the fact, and I reached out to a lot of people and just thanked them for, actually being supportive during that time. But anyways, it ends up being around 11, and I get a knock on my window because this whole thing is happening in my car, and which I've locked myself in, and I get a knock, and there's Nico. He's right there, and I kind of black out here and there, but next thing I know, I wake up in the hospital the next day, and they kind of, everyone kind of fills me in on what happened, and so yeah, I wake up in the hospital, and there's my mom, and she doesn't leave the whole time I'm there, and she's just there by my side, and she's doing little things like brushing my hair and rubbing my back, helping me eat. And I remember when I woke up, I just felt the same. I didn't really feel like happy to be awake. And especially because my mom was there. So, and even while I'm in the hospital, there's one nurse who had experience working in the psychiatric ward, but now she's a regular nurse. And she comes up to me and she asks me, she's like, so what happened? Why did you do that? And I decide that I'm going to confide in this nurse and tell her, like, well, it was my mom. She was making me feel really bad. And she tells me, she's like, your mom has been nothing but wonderful while you're here, so you just making that up. And I was like, here's a nurse who's even telling me this. And I was like, I can't catch a break. And so anyways, eventually my mom does end up going back home because we're actually supposed to be moving at this time. And we're supposed to be out of our house by the end of the month, which is approaching really fast at this point. And anyways, my mom leaves, and I finally, like, the nurses notice, like, I get instantly better. I start having more energy, and I start, actually being excited about doing stuff. And so they end up sending me to the psychiatric ward on the island next to us. And I end up staying there for a couple of weeks. And while I'm there, it slowly comes out that the reason everything happened was because of my mom. And they tell me, we can't let you go back home if that's where you're going to be going back home to. And so they end up arranging for me to stay on the island in a public housing area for people that have just gotten out of the situation that I've gotten out of.
Mm-hmm.
And so at first it's really nice. I start going to therapy 3 times a week in the program that they have, and I start instantly getting better. While I'm there, though, I end up having a roommate who I'm pretty sure also had borderline personality disorder.
Oh.
Yeah. And I end up having a lot of problems with her. And basically every day, she's picking a fight with me. And eventually, what ends up happening is I move back to the island to live with my father figure and his wife. And they tell me, you can stay here as long as you want until you get better, blah, blah, blah. And I'm really appreciative, but I also know that his wife doesn't really like me that much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I move back, and I immediately, as soon as I come back, my mom decides, oh, another story. When I'm in treatment on this neighboring island, my mom decides that she's going to go live in Mexico for a couple of months because she can't handle the stress. So I come back. My mom decides that now it's time for her to come back too.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as she comes back, the elders try and meet with her, and she refuses to meet with anyone. She's basically insulting anyone that comes near her, doesn't want anything to do with anyone in the congregation. And so here I'm thinking, okay, finally something's gonna happen. And after a couple of months of this happening, this elder's wife tells me that if I'm really a spiritual person, then I will forgive my mom so that she can start coming back to meetings.
Because again, it's all about your mom.
Yeah.
Good grief.
And she tells me, word for word, that again, I need to be more spiritual, and I need to go out and service more, and I need to be at the meetings more, and I need to comment, and that's how I'm going to cure my depression. And it was so annoying to hear that, because here I am, I'm thinking, well, the reason I'm here in the first place is by following advice from you guys and from you specifically. So I don't understand how I'm supposed to cure my depression by following advice from you guys that ended up with me in the hospital anyways. So I am trying to follow the advice of this sister, trying really hard to talk to my mom, but every time I talk to her, I feel transported back into that feeling that I had when I was at my lowest.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to explain this to them, and they just don't really seem to care about what I'm saying. So again, every time I talk to my mom, I feel this same feeling of completely feeling worthless and feeling like I am just a terrible person, and nobody's really listening to what I'm saying. And basically they just tell me that I need to suck it up. And especially this one sister who I'm living with, who keeps at every opportunity telling me that I need to be more spiritual. And at this point in time, it's been 6 months since I got out of the hospital. And I remember thinking, like, it's only been 6 months, and yet they expect me to, just jump right back into everything and act like nothing ever happened. And I just feel like I can't do it, and I don't understand why I can't just have a relationship with my mom if everyone keeps saying it's just so easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in therapy still, and my therapist suggests to me that I tell my mom I'll only talk to her if there's a therapist present. So I end up joining my mom on a therapy session, and I'm going into this meeting, and I'm trying to explain to the therapist, like, this is what's happening, and I think she needs to work on this and this and this. And I end up, again, I bring up the incident that happened when I was 10, because it's just one of those things that just keeps hurting me anytime I think about it.
It's trauma.
It's the trauma, yeah. And so I tell the therapist about this, and my mom straight out denies that it ever happened. She said, I never did that. You're lying. And I remember thinking, I was like, you didn't deny that this happened last time I brought it up. And so we ended up getting into a huge fight here in the therapist's office. And the therapist asked me, she's like, do you even want to have a relationship with your mom? And at the time I thought, it took me a really long time to answer, But I kept thinking, I was like, well, I think it's important. I think it's important. And that's only because that's what I was being told by
Sure.
the elders.
Sure.
That I needed to have a relationship with my mom. And that her spiritual standing was in my hands because I was the reason she wasn't going to meetings. So I tell her this, and I leave the meeting, and I'm like, okay, that went well. And, you know, this kind of keeps happening where I feel like I'm making progress, but then the elders and the elders' wives are telling me that I'm not making enough progress, and I need to speed it up. And so after a while, it kind of gets to be too much, where I kind of start falling, I stop making as much progress, and I start falling into my depression again. And it just kind of starts to spiral again. And at this point in time, my friend who has bipolar disorder is getting married, and I end up attending her wedding. And while I'm at her wedding, I end up feeling like I don't belong with all these people, and like I don't really fit in with any of them. And I've been in the hospital for a couple of months, and I'm back, and I'm trying to do better, but it kind of feels like people are kind of treating me with a little bit of distance.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of start, like, even though this girl is one of my closest friends, I start to feel excluded by everyone else that's there. And I don't really understand why that's happening, because things weren't always like that. And at this time, I'm also feeling kind of down because my friend who moved to China was one of the people that actually told me that I needed to stop spending time with this family and listen to my elders. And it turns out that she went behind my back to side with my mom and tell my mom that I needed to be a better daughter. And I had just found this out. And it was kind of hard because she played a big part in the wedding, and I didn't really know how to handle that very well. And I was also kind of upset that she never reached out to me while I was in the hospital, even though she was one of my closest friends. And so I end up having another breakdown at this wedding. And I decide to leave early because I don't want to ruin the wedding. So I leave early, and I drive an hour away, and I end up calling Nico, who's disfellowshipped at this point in time. And, I tell him, I was like, I just need to be around someone. And, I'm feeling very down right now. And we end up meeting up together, and we end up dating again from that point on, even though he's disfellowshipped and I'm still not disfellowshipped and trying to be a good witness. And that kind of goes on for a couple of months there.
Yeah, I mean, you don't normally date a disfellowship person as a witness. That
Yeah.
doesn't usually that's a rare thing, probably.
Yeah. And I knew it was bad, but like wrong according to JW's, but I was like, I don't really care about it because everyone who's supposed to be here for me is kind of not here for me. And so I just, I'm dating him, and things are actually going well. And I start living a quote unquote double life again because I'm going to meetings and I'm going out in service, and things seem to be going well for me spiritually. I end up meeting with the elders again because they're considering giving me back my privileges. And I go into the meeting, And I tell them, I was like, well, I'm dating Nico again. And they are all kind of shocked. Like, oh, even after you've been in the hospital, you still, you know, turn to a disfellowship person instead of your congregation who loves
Mm-hmm.
you and has been here for you, even though they haven't. And I tell them, I was like, I don't really want to be a witness anymore. I am done. Like, I want to be out of this. I'm very tired of doing this. And the elders don't really want to disfellowship me because, again, it's my father figure, his son, and this other elder. They kind of are close to me. And I'm telling them I don't want to be a witness anymore. And they really don't want to disfellowship me. Um, they keep telling me if you want, we can help you come back to Jehovah and fix you up spiritually. And I kept telling them, I was like, I don't want this. I'm tired of this. And finally, they tell me, okay, well, we're gonna have to disfellowship you. And I actually thanked them. I was like, okay, thank you. You know?
Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, I was like, finally, it's like it's taken me a couple minutes, but finally, you guys understand.
Yeah.
And so after that, I don't go back to the elder's house. I go and stay the night at Nico's house. And the next day, I get a text message from his wife, this elder's wife, telling me that I need to come and pick up all my crap,
Mm-hmm.
or otherwise she's going to throw it away. And I show up and all my stuff is out in the living room. And, before I get there, I apologized to her first because I was like, I'm sorry that I did this stuff that you don't agree with while I was living in your house. That wasn't cool. I'm sorry for misleading you. Like, I'm genuinely sorry about that. And then, she kind of she looks at me and she goes, "That's it? That's all you have to say to me?" I was like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to say. Like, I'm sorry for
That
the
seemed
things
pretty
that I
good to
did, but
me.
I'm not sorry that I'm, doing what I'm doing because I feel happier doing this. And she basically spends the next hour telling me, how terrible I am. And she basically tells me that my suicide attempt was all for show and for attention.
Ugh.
And that I've never once been spiritual since she met me, and that she regrets helping me out because I didn't deserve it and I ruined her friendship with my mom. And I I was so taken aback because I was like, here's this person that was supposed to be so spiritual, and yet she's treating me really terribly. And so I shut down and I tell her, I'm sorry, but I don't know what else to tell you. And so I pick up all my stuff, I put it in my car, and she tells me, I want you to give me all the money you have in your wallet. And I was like, okay. And so it ended up being about $40. I gave her it, and I was like, I'm done. Bye. See ya. And I found out later that she had actually had to have a judicial committee right after I was disfellowshipped. And I don't know what it was about, nor do I, I wasn't interested in prying or finding out. But yeah,
Yeah,
about a
because
month after I was disfellowshipped.
a lot of times, the people who are the most self-righteous are so self-righteous because they're hiding their own crap.
Yeah.
And they're trying to atone for it by putting somebody else down. But that's just the berating you for an hour, ranting about what a terrible person you are, all the blame and all that. I mean, she sounds like a top-notch narcissist herself.
Mhm.
Those are all hallmarks of things like
Yeah.
that. Just it seems like you were just surrounded by a lot of people with a lot of issues.
Yeah, I definitely was. Um After that happened, I only told 2 people that I was getting disfellowshipped. That was well, actually, I didn't. I told one person. One, you know, the elders found out, and the elders told people, and the only person I actually told was this other woman who was like my mom, who was my friend Jessica's mom,
Mm-hmm.
and I went down to meet with her because I had told her a couple of weeks ago that I was going to be moving into my own place, and she wanted to give me a couple of things for my new house so I didn't have to worry about them. And I get there and we have a really nice day together. I spend a couple hours with her, and I'm trying to delay as much as I can telling her that I'm going to get disfellowshipped
Yeah.
because she's going to shun me after that. And so I delay it right up until I'm about to leave. And then I tell her, I'm like, I have something to tell you. And, you know, and I just tell her right out, I'm going to get disfellowshipped. And, she sits me down and she asks me why. And I kind of go into a little bit of the detail as to why. And she tells me, we, you're leaving us. If you're gonna get this, if you're getting disfellowship, then I mean, it's like you're leaving us. And I try to tell her, like, I'm not choosing to not be friends with you guys. I still want that, but you have to make that decision if you want to go against what your religion is telling you.
Right.
And she keeps going on about how it's me, that I'm the one doing this and I'm the one that's abandoning them. And it was a really hard conversation to have, because part of me really was hoping that she would kind of tell me, like, oh, it doesn't matter that you're disfellowshipped.
Yeah.
But she told me, I've had people in my life get disfellowshipped before, and I'm sorry that that's happening, but I'll be waiting for you to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And it was still a sad moment, but it was a lot better than this other person who was supposed to be a spiritual person telling me that my suicide attempt was for show, and that she regrets helping me because now I'm disfellowshipped. Like, the contrast between those two people was a big thing that made me think, like, okay, I'm probably doing the right thing here, because something is clearly off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them are honestly abusive. Victim blaming is abusive as well, but it's
yeah.
I wish that person, I wish that mom, second mom, the one of your friends, I wish, as you were going into it, I was like, please tell me that she was able to rise above the conditioning. But apparently she wasn't able to either.
No.
Which, and I understand. I understand why she's a victim of the cult too.
Yeah, she is. And it's really heartbreaking to know also that she's following the rules of the cult. Yep. And shunning me, but people that she's close to don't consider her to be a spiritual person.
Oh, I know. They all talk crap about her.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a bummer. It's like, oh,
yeah,
you're doing what you're supposed to, but still people don't treat you well.
Nope.
No.
It's never enough with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a shame, because she sounds like she was a pretty genuinely good person. She's, just caught up in this thing, and she believes. So what you gonna do?
Yeah.
You have to accept. She believes what she believes. As toxic and hurtful as it is, and I'm sorry, because I wish I was hoping for an end there that, and I assume the same is true with her kids and husband as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Her daughter actually reached out to me after I got disfellowshipped, and she texted me and told me, that Jehovah was waiting for me, and that she hoped,
Yeah.
that she too was gonna be waiting for me to come back, and that, she loved me and everything. But I ended up calling her and telling her, I'm not coming back, and I'm thank you, but I don't want to be a part of this anymore. It's just too much for me.
Yeah.
And and then she stopped talking to me. But she was actually the only person that was out of my friends to reach out to me after I got disfellowshipped. Everyone else just immediately started shunning me.
Yeah. You think when you leave, like, that the shunning is to start. But if these people have the one and only truth, and if they truly love and care about you, you think that they're going to reach out to you.
Yeah.
And they don't. They're nowhere to be found. They just abandon you instantly, and it's just shows the power of the toxic doctrine and the organization and the fear that they put in people, that they lose these relationships that once meant something to them, and they just move on.
Yep.
So how long ago was that? How long have you been out now?
Only a few months. That was in March, I believe.
Of 2019.
Of 2019, yes.
Wow. And since you've been out, first let me ask, have you heard from any of your former witness friends or your mom? Did your mom just instantly shun you too? I assume I know the answer, but
no, actually she did not. Which is really funny. She actually showed up at my house one day and told me that she did not care that I was disfellowshipped, and that I was still her daughter, and that she was still gonna be there for me. Which would have been a really nice sentiment if she hadn't, been an abusive parent to me my entire life.
Yeah, if she was actually gonna be there for you, that's a whole new dynamic.
Yeah. And so I, at first I told her, I was like, oh, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. But after a couple of weeks of her, trying to talk to me and realizing that, oh, this is still a really stressful thing for me to do, is interact with my mom, I decided, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I stopped talking to her, and I ended up having to block her because it was just, too much. She would send me text messages trying to guilt me into talking to her again.
Yeah.
And she actually showed up at my work too one day to try and talk to me. And I was actually very proud of myself, because I told her to essentially to get lost. And it was really nice because both of my boss and her daughter were there at the time, and they told me, they're like, if she ever comes back here, we're gonna tell her to get out, that she's not welcome here.
Yeah.
Because we care about your mental health. And I was like, this is the first time anybody's done that for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and it was kind of really nice, because I was like, here are the first people doing this for me. Something I've been asking for years at this point, and it took a worldly person to finally get that support that I needed.
Yeah. I bet it did feel good, because, it makes sense now as I'm thinking about it for her not to go along with the shunning, because in the end, again, she needs you.
Yeah.
She's looking for something from you, so she doesn't want to let go of that.
Yeah.
because it's all about her. You know, this really, I was thinking about her and the father figure elder, his wife, just some of these characters in this story, and it makes me think of there's some sort of it's like a meme. I think it's from a movie, but it's like a guy, he gets fed up and he just goes down the line and he's like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, you're cool, and fuck you, or something like that.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
and you know, like it would feel good on some level to be able to say that to these awful people, to just say fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Oh yeah, you were pretty cool. You know, maybe to the mom of your family, of that family you know were so friendly with, and then you know
Yeah.
peace out on it all, because it's just this is just listening to all this. It's one of the more mentally and emotionally disturbing stories to hear from the standpoint of what a person with borderline personality disorder can do in manipulating situations and harming you, her daughter, and then getting everyone on her side. It's like gaslighting to an extreme degree, and it's just it's disturb it's hard to listen to, because um you know, nobody deserves to live a life where that is done to them all the time. You know, like you
Yeah.
deserved better, and I'm sorry you had to go through all that.
Yeah. And I feel like even though obviously, you know, ending up in the hospital was
Yeah.
not an ideal situation, the therapy that I went through after I got out was it was a big help in preparing me to actually leave
Yeah.
the cult, because you know there's a lot of things that you know they were kind of telling me like, okay, these are unhealthy things, the way your mom is treating you, and this is how a healthy person behaves. And I started seeing the connections not only between my mom but also between other people and between you know the organization as a whole.
Yeah.
And it started pretty much as soon as I got out, it started to become really difficult to justify the idea that you know Jehovah was there for me when clearly I ended up in the hospital, and he, you know, for a year nothing was done.
Yeah. Yeah. You were let down a lot by a
Yeah.
lot of people and you know, deities throughout the story. Now, since you've been out, you know, as you said, since March, so
Yeah.
it just started November, so I don't know. That's months. That's like 7 months.
6 months,
Yeah,
maybe
6 7
7.
months. Yeah. So, what do you like? What do you know? Obviously, these people are all out of your life now, but what do
Yeah.
you like about the life you have since you've left? You know, what is that amount that, because you talked about how anytime you got away from your mom, things went better. You're away now from all these toxic people. How has your life been?
Yeah. My mental health dramatically improved.
Yeah.
Um, I found out that, like, after I left the cult, that I actually had PTSD, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
why it was really hard for me to deal with my mom.
Yes.
And so, you know, now that I know that about myself, it's actually become a lot easier to deal with things and to, you know, better my mental health, because now I know what I'm dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another thing that I love is being able to pick and choose who's in my life.
Yeah.
And that's become really nice, because there's been people that I've met that I don't like. And I don't have to be friends with them,
Mm-hmm.
because we're both adults and not everyone gets along. And that's okay. Um, I definitely love being able to tell my mom to get lost and not feel the JW guilt about it.
Yes. Yes.
Um, yeah, we've celebrated a couple of holidays since I've been out, which has actually been really fun. Um, we celebrated. I celebrated my first birthday in July, and that was awesome. It was
Nice.
actually really fun to like have a day where I get to be celebrated, and it's not actually a crazy big deal like JWs make it out to be.
Yep.
Um, we I've gotten to be really good friends with some of my coworkers at my job,
Nice.
and they've actually, invited me. I got invited to my first Halloween party by one of my coworkers, and it's just been a really nice adventure so far since I've been out. Like, I don't feel this pressure all the time
Yeah.
to take care of somebody else the way I did growing up. And it's like now I tell people my story and they're like, "Oh, that's messed up." And
Yeah.
and it's like, "Yeah, you know what? It is messed up, and thanks for acknowledging that." Instead of just, telling me to suck it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also attended my first Pride event since I've been out, which has been really fun. I mean, since I've been out, I actually discovered about myself that I'm bisexual. So that has been really nice to know. Because growing up as a JW, I always felt like there was something in the back of my mind that I wasn't quite acknowledging.
Right.
And now that I'm out, it's like, oh, that was a really big part of me, and now I get to acknowledge it.
Yes.
So that's been nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're the best part about being out, Shunned podcast. I mean,
Shunned podcast,
really,
yeah.
Being on the Shunned podcast, that's got to be a highlight, right?
Actually, yeah, it was actually really cool. I was like, I was telling Nico, I was like, I'm gonna get to tell my story tomorrow, and it's gonna be really nice. It's gonna be cathartic, and I'm gonna get to say all of it, and nobody's gonna judge me for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's being able to kind of express myself and see what I like and what I don't like has been really fun.
Yeah, I think that's called living.
Yeah, exactly.
For the first time.
Yeah. I was talking to my therapist the other day, and she's like, yeah, you're going through what pretty much, all adolescents go through when they go to college, and that's, learning about yourself. And I was like, oh, you're right. This is a normal part of life.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Should be anyway.
And yes, it's been kind of interesting to, kind of break down barriers as far as realizing that a lot of things that I didn't like doing actually had to do with the influence of my mom. So I've been learning how to swim because as a kid, I was terrified of the water because my mom had put it in my head that it was, if I even went, in it, that I was going to be killed, essentially. I was going to drown. And now it's like, I learned how to swim and I actually enjoy to swim. And it's like, I like to cook. I didn't grow up cooking. And now it's like, as an adult, I get to learn really like small stuff like that usually people already know about themselves, but it's like now I'm getting my shot to learn about it.
Yeah, and it sometimes sucks to learn this stuff as adults, but at the same time, when you do learn it as an adult, you appreciate it more.
Yeah,
because you remember learning these things, and it might mean more to you in certain ways. So that can be pretty cool. Do you have any dreams? Anything that, like, I know right now you're kind of like in this experimentation phase, trying to figure out who you are, which is normal. We all go through that. But do you have anything that, maybe you really want to do or even just want to try at some point? Do you have any dreams for your new life?
I do have a bucket list that I've been putting together since I got disfellowshipped. One thing that even as a witness I wanted to do, but it's like now I actually feel like, okay, maybe I'll actually have the opportunity to do that, is I want so badly to go see the Northern Lights and things like that. I want
Oh
to be able to
yeah.
experience a natural phenomenon without the pressure of, oh, let's thank Jehovah for this. Like,
Right.
no, it's just a really cool thing that happens, and there's a really cool scientific reason behind it.
Yeah.
And yeah, things like that. Another thing, I mean, a small goal is I'm looking forward to celebrating Christmas
Oh
for the
yeah,
first time
yeah.
since
That's
I
cool.
was like 3.
Awesome.
Yeah. I have the feeling I'm gonna be a Christmas person where I just really love Christmas, and yeah, I am thinking about what I would love to do in the future. Part of me is, as a kid, I really loved, like archaeology and like learning about history and kind of piecing together the lives of, people from the past.
hmm
And that's something that I'm kind of looking into again. And I don't know, maybe that will lead somewhere. Maybe it won't. And that's okay. There's no pressure, which is
Yeah, yeah.
nice.
You can just explore life, and that you don't have to have like a certain outcome or it's a failure. You just explore life, and it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's like now, me and Nico live together, and that's kind of how we view the future, as far
Yeah.
as our goals go. It's like we get to just experiment and we get to see what works for us and what doesn't work for us. And whatever happens is fine.
Yep.
It's not a big deal either way.
I love
So,
that. I love that.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for telling your story and being willing to do so,
Yeah.
and for being real about things.
I tried.
I appreciate that, and I think that when you're real, people will relate to it more. So I do really appreciate you doing that. I want to thank everybody. All these 10 episodes that I'm releasing, pretty much at once. I want to thank everybody who was brave enough to tell their stories. It takes courage to speak out, and I know it's very cathartic for people to listen back to later. So I wish the best for everybody. If you want to support the podcast and the work that goes into it, or the new website, xjwhelp.com, you can support them both at patreon.com/shunned. Patreon is Patreon. So that's patreon.com/shunned. This work matters. It matters to the people that are listening. That would be you. It matters to the people who are watching videos that are helping to find or finding the help that they need. It matters to the people that get to participate and hear their stories being told in their own voice, or that sometimes reconnect with other people from their past through their episodes, or even you reach out to these people and leave a comment of encouragement to them, and that matters. It matters to people that are listening that are from other cults, and they get to see that they aren't alone because there's so many similarities. So if this matters to you, please support it so we can help more people. You can also support by leaving a 5-star review for both Shunned and This JW Life, my initial podcast. These reviews help others to find these stories so that we can help them heal. And if you hear an episode that you like, share it on social media. Tell others on the XJW Reddit or some group about it. Wherever you are, if there's something that impacts you, one of the highest compliments you can ever pay is to pay it forward and to tell other people about the episode or the podcast in general, or the coaching or the Shunned Recovery Project, or whatever it is that's helping you. Please help share it to other people, because there are a lot of people that don't know these things exist. If you like, that goes for the new site as well. If you like the new site, xjwhelp.com, please share it to others. Keeping it to yourself isn't going to help anybody. So let's make 2020 the start of something big as a community. Support good work. Participate if you can. Help others, and let's take our power back. If you want individual help, then reach out to me through xjwhelp.com or shunnedpodcast.com. Leave a message of support for the people telling their stories. Get resources mentioned on the website along with links to support the show, or contact me if there's something that you need to discuss. Join the Shunned Podcast Facebook group, which is a support group. So get involved. If we want something different, then we're going to have to do something different. Let's be the start. The song for the show today, as always, is No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. And as I end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
We'll curse God.